OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
And you're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Gilroy and Eoin Sheahan with you this morning all the way through until 10 o'clock. We want to hear from you today, and I've no doubt some of the topics that we're talking about will definitely exercise you. 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can send us a WhatsApp on that. You can send us a text on that. Or, of course, you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. We want to start, obviously, by doing what all the shows have done over the last 24 hours or so, and just paying some attention to Alan McLaughlin and the incredible career that he put together, and just the very nice human being that he was, and the tragedy for his family of his very early passing after a battle with cancer. We'll talk in more detail about that a little bit later on with John Duggan, who would have worked with him pretty closely at Today FM when he was doing games with Premier League Live. He also did games with us on Off the Ball on News Talk on Sundays, and we always found him to be brilliant to deal with. Did road shows with us and was more than happy to relive the story and just talk about his career as well, his relationship with Ireland, his parents, all that kind of stuff that we managed to delve into. So hopefully some of that audio will start to bubble up over the next few days, and there's been some great stuff being paid on Twitter as well, if you've seen it, or if you missed last night's football show, and I know a lot of you will actually have been watching the game. It's well worth going back to dig out the podcast of Andy Townsend, Packy Bonner and Ray Houghton talking about the incredible bond that team had, helped in no small part by Larry Mullen arriving when they were in New York with 2 limousines and taking the whole team out to show them the sights, to show us around, as Ray Houghton said, kind of like he was a local, which at that stage, maybe in 1994, Larry Mullen was a local, which ends up with them all eating McDonald's on the hood of the limos at 3 o'clock in the morning. The type of thing that now, obviously, everybody with their camera phones out would be like, oh, Ireland re-shaming, or Ireland shame, refueling football nonsense, but actually it turned out it was just a good bonding exercise for the team. The wives and girlfriends were in Orlando, the lads were in New York, they were having the crack. More good stuff like that on last night's football show. A reminder, of course, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. David Meyler's going to join us in about 10 minutes to talk about last night's Champions League, and we'll get into that in a moment. We did want to also point out that on Taoiseach Micheál Martin was on the show last night speaking with Joe. About 45 minutes, they get into loads of stuff which dominates some of the back pages this morning. They talked about boxing in Ireland and whether or not we're likely to see a professional card anytime soon. The answer is no. They talked about the funding for the greyhound industry. Micheál Martin was fairly defensive of that and says that as an industry, it's part agriculture, and lots of people it is their number one sport, but that the industry needs to really win back the trust of the Irish people. There was no clear kind of indication of how that's going to happen, so we'll keep a close eye on that one. 2 other things that they talked about that we'll get into in more detail a little bit later on. PE and the teaching of PE in primary schools. They spent a good bit of time on that, and a huge response actually on Twitter overnight. I just want to read some of the quick tweets from Dermot Looney here. We'll come back to this, as I said, in more detail. Some suggestions: time allocation, at least 1 hour should be moved from the 2.5 hours allotted to religious education in the week to PE. Those hours should be moved outside school hours altogether, but Shin Scale Ella, this extra hour should be used to teach the PE curriculum in full, all strands. It's almost like the solution is so obvious, it's staring us right there in the face, that in primary school we spend way more time teaching religion than we do PE, and we're bottom of the class when, in European terms, when it comes to teaching PE. Is there an easy fix there? Because one of the answers from Taoiseach last night was, look, there's loads in the curriculum already. There's maths and English and modern languages and science. Religion is the big one. We've decided that we prioritise religion over the health and well-being of our kids. And that's just a thing that we've done as a country. That's a choice we made. We can come back to that a little bit later on, as I said. Expand links with local clubs and organisations is being championed in the Active Flag programme. PE provision from the class teacher can be supplemented with age-appropriate planned for coaching tied into the curriculum. That was one of the ideas they talked about too. The other thing, though, that really struck me last night was at the end of the conversation they spoke about TV broadcast rights deals. Obviously the Six Nations is upcoming at the moment, but also the GAA. And he expressly said that he wasn't a fan of the Sky deal. Maybe this reopens that whole debate about whether or not the GAA and Sky should be embedded. It certainly felt that like that ship had sailed, and the GAA are obviously talking about potentially having Amazon involved when the next round of rights are up for negotiations. But from a broadcast perspective, the most significant change was he suggested that he thinks the Six Nations should be protected. Now, you'll remember that Eamon Ryan tried to get a bill passed that would have protected the Six Nations the last time the Green Party were in government. So it'll be very interesting to see if the Green Party revisit this, because if you remember, the investment from CVC, the venture capital firm, in the Six Nations, we've all made the assumption that that's predicated on maximising the amount of money they can make from the TV rights deals, which would suggest selling to the highest bidder, which in turn almost certainly will be a paid-for broadcaster. So, is this an official change in government policy? Are we likely to see something rush through? Would it be popular, Eoin?
It would definitely be popular. I think to keep the Six Nations on free-to-air only would definitely be popular. I know that the IRFU probably don't want that. The CVC definitely don't want that to be pushed through. If that becomes one of the protected sporting events, like, nothing exists in isolation, and I wonder, from what we've seen over the last few weeks in the football world, does that impact people's thinking when it comes to the Six Nations? Like, I mean, if you're a kid in the UK, for example, and I mean, the Florentino Perez is 16 to 24-year-olds, if you're one of those people in the UK, you've obviously got to pay a subscription to watch the ChampionsLeague on BT Sport at the moment. Are you getting the same amount of exposure to football on European nights as somebody who grew up in the early 2000s would have done? The answer is no, and that will be the case to Six Nations if it goes behind a paywall, that people in that age bracket just won't get the same exposure to Six Nations rugby, and as a result they won't get exposure to rugby full stop, because let's face it, it is the gateway for everybody in this country who doesn't come from a rugby background to actually watch rugby union take place. And that for me is a big thing. But then it's about putting a value on that. Is it a bigger value than the money that will come in from CVC, for example, that will be crucial to the running of the IRFU over the next few years?
I'm very conflicted about this. I don't think that there's a straight line. I know that people point to specific examples, but the devil can quote scripture for their purposes. Like, why does the taxpayer in the form of RTE foot the bill for all of those sports events that we see? Why, when there's an alternative out there? Like, I'm not really sure that, it doesn't make any sense to me that happens. And the other thing about rugby is that there's going to be, apparently, it was in the Sunday Times a couple of weeks back in a piece that Dennis Walsh wrote. It's an open secret in the industry that the Pro 14 is going to RTE next year. This doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, and so if the Pro 14 is on free to air, why do you then need the Six Nations as well?
Like, I mean, the Six Nations is a much bigger thing. Will the Pro 14 attract the same level of audience?
You'll still have the exposure. Do you know, like...
Well, like, your point about the licence fee, obviously, RTE don't have the men's Six Nations anyway at the moment. I mean, like, Virgin Media obviously have it at the moment.
And that's where it should stay, because that costs the taxpayer nothing. So, absolutely. And I think that we kind of need to separate here out the stuff that we pay for as a society. We decide that we need to pump money into sports organisations who are already getting grants from the Exchequer. If we specify free to air on a non-licensed fee receiving channel, then fair enough. I'm a bit more interested in that. But it's just this kind of sense that, like, we have to put stuff on the national broadcaster which we're already paying for. Like, would we not be better off paying for, like, current affairs or drama or the arts through that, which isn't getting funding already and which can't attract sponsorship?
Maybe, but like I think then there's a difference between the free-to-air broadcaster that is funded by the public and free-to-air broadcasters that aren't funded by the public.
There is.
That's where there is a bit of a line. I think there's a more defined line maybe between free-to-air and non-free-to-air. Like, just to kind of go back to what I was saying, like, I think when this conversation first came up before CVC invested in such a huge stake in the Six Nations, there was a comparison immediately with football. And it was like, football went behind a paywall and it was totally fine. Are we starting to see now that football actually wasn't fine whatsoever? That narrative that football survived by being behind a paywall was actually totally wrong. That, I mean, there is a global enjoyment of the sport that is at a whole different level. But is it actually through the prism of watching the Premier League, for example, week in, week out? I'm not sure it is. I think maybe I know for a fact, obviously, that figures are way higher for free-to-air football than it would be for behind-a-paywall football. And that does have an effect over a period of time. And I just think that rugby is obviously in a more precarious situation for that to have a bigger footprint on it.
Well, again, like, you know, I think that we could be, we can make very hard and fast rules about this, but actually there's significant nuances. Say for example, the men's Six Nations went behind a paywall, but the women's Six Nations suddenly gets played on free-to-air TV and does huge numbers. Kids are still getting exposure to high-quality international rugby. What's the difference?
The next step then would be that the Women's Six Nations goes behind a paywall at some stage.
But like, very unlikely that that's going to happen for a significant period of time. Like, and what you could do is you could say that, you know, we're going to protect women's sport and put that and make that something that you have to put on terrestrial TV, because there is a genuine public service nature to that, in that at the moment a lot of the broadcasters aren't spending or investing in women's sport the way they should do, and you get to balance things up. There's definitely ways of being clever about this to help society engineer some things here, as opposed to just saying paywall bad. And let's face it, you know, back in the day it used to be that you would have to have a full subscription. Now you can watch any match for a tenner. And like most people, if the thing that they want to see is behind a paywall, will scrimp and save and find the tenner to watch that match. And like, is that actually too much to pay for a high quality event? Like, the fact that it was given away for free when it wasn't free because you were paying through your license fee mostly up to this point. Like, is there?
But the tenner's not the point, is it? Like, I mean,
tenner is the point.
But it's not. It's like those people who will pay the tenner are the people who are happy to spend money on watching rugby. My point is that
a bunch of people who aren't interested. A bunch of people who aren't interested are going to be not going to have exposure to this.
Genuinely think that the floating voter, when it comes to Irish sport, is more in tune with Six Nations rugby than they are with perhaps any other sport, with the exception of maybe the latter stages of the All-Irelands. Also free to air. That's my point here. Maybe there's no value on it.
Well, that's the point. So what the floating voter, right? Those like what's the benefit of those floating voters to the actual sport? Are they going on the basis of sitting on the couch, you know, smeared in your Doritos and having some beers at the weekend, watching the rugby? Are we saying that they're going to catapult to the local rugby club?
Maybe.
And go and spend time with coaching kids?
They maybe not that, but they may be inclined to invest in a ticket because they've seen how great this event looks on television, and then all of a sudden they might actually inject some money into the IRFU's coffers the following year. Maybe. I'm not saying they're definitely going to do it, but I just think that there's a chance. There is a marketing value to free-to-air sport.
This is just marketing. So it's just that's it. It's not actually about participation, and it's not actually about a loyalty to that sport.
You can market for participation. You can market for loyalty. Like,
you can do that other ways.
First step towards. Like, I mean, it's not just rugby people who are going to be playing rugby forever. Like, new people will come to the sport eventually, and I'm just saying this could be one of the ways that new people could potentially come to the sport. Maybe,
but you know, everybody watches the Olympics every 4 years, and you know, for the next 3 or 4 weeks, the kids in the back garden are pretending to do the javelin, but that doesn't mean all of a sudden there are tens of thousands of Irish javeliners.
But there are way more rugby clubs than there would be access to good javelin training.
And so here's the thing, those rugby clubs are all absolutely bereft of money in the aftermath of what's happened at the moment. So if you're the organisation who is like making a play for the next 10 years, you've got the decision to go, can I get that person sitting on the couch to buy a ticket or a jersey next year by giving this match to him free? Or can I bank this money and invest it in coaches who then become the equivalent of games development officers in the GAA and go out and try and spread the gospel? Which of these two things is better for me as a sports organisation? I think it's fair to have that conversation, right? But I think it's also fair, if you're the sports organisation, to bank the money and trust your pathways to try and grow the game, as opposed to, for the last 40 years it's been free and we haven't seen a massive surge in participation numbers. That's the problem.
Oh, listen, I'm all for a conversation around this. Like, I've been a massive fan of Sky Sports coverage of GAA, for example. I think it's been good for the fan of Gaelic games. I really love what BT do with the Champions Cup, for example, as opposed to the Heineken Cup being on free-to-air days. Like, the analysis is better. I do think there's something in the fact that the sports fan is not only unmoved by this, but actually might have a benefit from this in some ways. And if there is going to be a trickle down from the subscription fees, especially when it comes to the GAA, And I think that is definitely a positive, no question about it. It's just about what that represents, I think, and I know this is getting away from rugby a little bit, it's just about what that represents from the standpoint of Gaelic games and the amateur ethos. I know rugby don't have the same thing to worry about, but that amateur ethos, does that get stained by putting your product behind a paywall? It was always the big question around this, in my view. I think putting it behind a paywall and, you know, no access to broadband or whatever, my dad doesn't have Sky or whatever, I'd limited sympathy for that argument, to be honest. But
the only thing about the paywall is that you can't walk in free to matches. Like, do you know, you can't just walk into... You can't walk into a local championship match. You can't walk into a local league match for free. You've got to pay €5 or €8 at the door. Like, why would you expect to be able to watch the best for nothing? That's the bit that...
Because that money is going directly to the club. If you pay €5 to go into your GAA club, that money is definitely going towards the club. Like, I mean, the subscription you're giving to Sky, that money is not going directly to...
Some of it is. They pay for that.
Some of it is, but not all of it is.
No, but... Well, the technology, the amazing technology that allows you to sit in your home and receive this HD and the quality.
I pay for it. I'm not saying that it's not something that I don't want to do. I love doing it. I think it's fantastic. I'm just saying this is the view of the people who have had an issue with Sky Sports down the line. I completely empathise with that point of view, even though I would be a hypocrite if I said that I was fully strongly behind that view.
Yeah, look, I just think that this conversation, the pay-per-view bad is definitely a view that's out there, and I can see that there are different ways that you can make that case, but I can also see the case that the game has changed, particularly because you can now buy one-off or month-long, and it has become very affordable and very easy to deliver, where very few TVs in the country are no longer capable of receiving the signal, where it's like a flick of a button and you pay your tenner and away you go. So it's no longer you need to tether yourself to some kind of long-term relationship. And it's going to be very interesting to see what the IRFU do, because they very quickly fought a rearguard action the last time. But to have a sitting Taoiseach sit in the studio last night and say that actually the time has come for free-to-air to be guaranteed for the Six Nations, that's a very interesting moment from a policy perspective. We'll come back to this a little bit later on, but we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. OTB AM, live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Going to talk with David Meyler about last night's ChampionsLeague straight away. Run you through the sports pages. Our contenders slot in the GAA today, we're focusing on Kerry. We have the under-20 Kerry football coach Sean O'Sullivan with us at 8:20. John Duggan's going to join us at 8:35. We'll remember Alan McLaughlin as well. The Irish Relay Stars at 8:50, fresh from qualifying for the Olympic Games. The tight five with Neil Treacy, where controversially Johnny Sexton is not amongst his selection for the Lions. We'll find out Thursday if Warren Gatland is of a mind with Neil Treacy, and then we'll bring you Brian O'Driscoll from 9:30 this morning as well. David Meyler, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, lads.
Look, before we talk about the Champions League, you played in midfield for the Republic of Ireland, and Alan McLaughlin passed away sadly yesterday. It's one of those moments that I think makes all of us feel a little bit old, where somebody from that legendary team that qualified for 2 World Cups, and particularly that moment that he created in Irish sport, has passed away so young. What are your recollections of the goal, and did you ever get to meet Alan McLaughlin? Was there ever any opportunity to talk to him?
No, unfortunately I never met Alan. Obviously, look, the goal against Northern Ireland in Windsor Park is spoken about. I would have been, it was obviously 93, I'd have been 4 at the time, so I don't have much recollection of it. Saw clips of it over the years, of course, because it's the famous and it's an iconic moment. But anyone like you've listened to or heard speaking about him in the last few days, who spoke really highly about the person he was. We all know he was a very good footballer, but it's always interesting to hear this kind of family side to him, and obviously everybody's speaking really highly of him, and he was a great footballing man, and it is a tragic loss. Someone at that age who, and everybody was only playing 28, 29 years ago, to think he's lost his life, and my thoughts do go to his family. 40
odd caps at a time when Jack Charlton would pick Paul McGrath in midfield, and you had Townsend and you had Ronnie Whelan and a bunch of others at that stage as well. So that kind of speaks to his talent as well.
No, 100%. Like, you look at the midfielders you just listed out there, and then of course you have a young Roy Keane coming through at that time too, so it was very difficult. And certainly back then it wasn't, they didn't play as many games as we did, as we do now. So that tells you the testament to the player he was. He was a fantastic servant to Ireland, to receive that amount of caps. But it just goes down to show, like, it was very tough, but he stuck in there. He got his caps. He turned up whenever it was required. He performed when he needed to. It is a big loss for Irish football.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's talk about Manchester City last night. They did exactly what they needed to do, and it's the type of managing of a game that this Pep team has not been able to do in Champions Leagues in previous years. So what's different this time about this City team?
I think they were just so resilient last night in their performance. You know, they obviously sat down. I think they would have reflected on, say, last year's campaign, certainly losing to Lyon, where we all remember he adjusted his tactics and we kind of said, what are you doing? We kind of realised that after. And last night, certainly, they just narrowed off through the middle. You know, the back four were tight to midfielders. You looked at even the front three. I've never seen Riyad Mahrez work so hard. Everything about them, they just frustrated the living daylights out of, you know, PSG. Like Neymar had nowhere to go at times. He was trying to dribble, but he'd no space to get into any time. Then he was afforded some bit of space. Like all four defenders turned up with blocks, tackles, everything. They were really, the thing that probably took me the most was how they were just so resilient in their terms of defending and how they stuck together. You know, every man did his job fantastically well. And of course, when the opportunities arose, they took their goals superbly well.
I'm not sure, did you ever play against Fernandinho, but he seems like an absolute nuisance when he's in that sort of form.
Yeah, I have played against him several times, yeah. You forget he's been in the Premier League a long time. But what a player, like to turn 36 yesterday and put in a performance like that. Like, he has mastered, you know, the dark arts and like his little fouling all the time. But he never picks up yellow cards. Of course, you've seen it in different games where he has unfortunately picked them up. The Premier League have probably copped onto him a little bit more. But it's slight little trips here and there. But as a player, his reading of the game is just exceptional. The little pockets where he picks up to, you know, make block after block, whether it be like, you know, cutting passes off or just stopping the run of some player. And then, of course, look on the ball, he's an exceptionally gifted passer of it. Like for any young midfielder watching that last night, he's certainly like a holding midfielder. You could learn so much from him.
How does he get away with it so often when it comes to the it's not ill discipline because he's not getting punished for it.
Shithousery.
Yeah, okay, it's shithousery.
Yes, that's one way of putting it, Jar. Well, what does help him is he has got the armband on his arm, so he'll get the little rub of the green off the referees there for that. It's if you look at, say, PSG late on, you know, when they lost the rag and they lost their heads and they were fouling, you look at the types of fouls they're making. They're wild, they're reckless. These are always little kind of bumps and they're little, you know, toe pokes at somebody just to like clip their ankles, almost like, you know, like he's tripping them up, but it's not cynical, and it's like he'll pick the player up and it's kind of like he'll put his hands out and kind of go, okay. There's no kind of arguing. If you remember, was it Ander Herrera and Bernardo Silva where there's a big faff? With Fernandinho, there's not much of that. He doesn't get involved in those, you know, childish little games where there's no needless yellow cards picked up. And he's a master at upsetting the rhythm of like these types of players, like your Neymars, your Di Marias. Like even if you go as far as, you know, the sending off for Di Maria. Like I remember I was sitting down watching it with my wife and I said, there's a bit of Brazil and Argentina there, you know, like a little bit of rivalry. But it's just he gets in his head for that split second where, you know, Di Maria lashes out. And it's just that knowledge and know-how of how to, you know, wind someone up, get them to react. And he is superb at it. But those players like the PSG ones, you've got to know better. Like they're all international players, been in Europe a long time. Like you can't be falling for little mind games like those.
Have you seen that happen before? That a team just collectively loses their head so convincing? Like Neymar seemed like the level-headed guy on the pitch last night, which is really saying something.
You see it a lot, really. Like they would have felt that they were still in the game. Of course, look, the loss of Mbappe is massive. Certainly when, you know, I listened to Verratti speak after, Herrera after, they kind of spoke about like they dominated the game, they were the better side, they had more possession. They never created much. Okay, look, Marquinhos hit the bar, Di Maria had that chance. They never really created clean-cut chances where you thought like, oh, they've got to score here, they've got to score there. You know, they would have felt always in the game, but inevitably they weren't going anywhere. They weren't doing much. Like City, like Pep had obviously sat down and worked this out, like, how do we stop them? And then he had, look, the Man City players 1 to 14 with the subs that came on were all drilled. It was just an exquisite display from them.
Like Zinchenko, Diaz, Stones were all like Richard Dunn in Moscow that night. They were all unbelievable. Like and it seems that they're just getting such a buzz off every single block that they make, and the collective energy that they're giving each other after each block.
But there was a great instance in the second half. I don't know if you remember, Gundogan had the ball in the middle of midfield. He played a couple of passes and he turned out to come out to the right-hand side where you'd expect Riyad Mahrez to be, obviously looking to get in behind, so you push their left back, and Kyle Walker would bomb up the field. Kyle Walker never came forward. And there was a moan. He turned and the hands came up in the air and was kind of like, come on, get up. And then Gundogan obviously turned back inside because he had no pass on. He ended up losing possession. But it was fascinating to look at because you'd expect, City with their fullbacks bombing on, but they were just quite content in saying, we're like, the back four had a job to do. And you spoke obviously about Zinchenko, Diaz and Stones, the numbers of blocks, tackles, etc. they made. But they didn't commit too much space in behind. They know the danger of PSG, and they had, it was a tactical master plan, and they all nailed it to a T. And then, of course, look, in moments where PSG are going to break it down, Stones, Diaz, block after block. It was just an incredible team performance with every player playing to the maximum of their capability.
Those fullbacks not really pushing on outrageously last night. Was that kind of similar to how they started the first leg as well? But maybe on this occasion, just PSG weren't at the races compared to how they were maybe at the start of the first leg?
Well, it's always very difficult. You play at home and play away. Of course, look, I know PSG have a fantastic away record. I think they've only lost one game since January going into that. So, of course, as well, when I highlight the fullbacks not getting forward, somebody would be quick to say, well, Ederson's a long ball over the top to Zinchenko. Of course, but that's the way, the team had slotted around in that position, which afforded Zinchenko to get forward at that time. But PSG started, obviously, very brightly in the first leg. Look, Pep learned from it. I imagine the Man City players learned from it. They would have looked back, they would have watched the game. Where could we nullify the space? Neymar had, ran them ragged first half an hour of that game. You think about it, what did he do last night? He couldn't really make anything happen. Anytime he got the ball, he was on the other side of, Manchester City's midfield, where that's where you want Neymar, where he has to beat your midfield, and then he has to get to, if he gets past them, he has to get past the defenders, which is very, very difficult. As exceptional as he is, it just frustrated the life out of a lot of them, where they couldn't do much and they couldn't get into the game.
Is there a case to be made for Ederson as Manchester City's Footballer of the Year? Jonathan Northcroft was making that point in the Sunday Times.
Oh, well, no. Yeah, how can you say that with the performances of Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, Phil Foden? Of course, look, Ederson's range of passing, it's not normal. Keepers, not only keepers, but a lot of midfield players, defenders can't. The passes, his pinpoint passing is exceptional. Like, he's dropped that with one step onto, Zinchenko's toe, in putting him through into a dangerous area. That's a good 60, 70 yard pinpoint pass. Okay, look, he's getting a bit carried away with, football. There's certainly other players that will be ahead of him.
Can we talk about the evolution of Mahrez as somebody and the general kind of point where we get to now in his career? It was obviously brilliant for Leicester when they won the league, but you never really felt like, well, I wasn't sure if it was going to go on and become a career at that level. And even when he got to City, it was kind of in and out a bit. He'd be in for a period of time, there'd be a streak, he'd come back out. And it always felt like Sterling was a good bit ahead of him. Now Sterling isn't, and obviously Foden is the direct replacement for Sterling, but there was a mix there, or it felt like they'd invested so much in Gabriel Jesus that he would ultimately be ahead of him. And even before that, Leroy Sané was like, well, he's not going to get in the team for a long, sustained period of time. And yet, as you said, you've never seen him work harder. That's the coaching bit that maybe we take for granted when it comes to Guardiola, that his ability to inspire players to get beyond what we thought they were capable of, while at the same time still being the best version of themselves.
No, definitely. I think Riyad Mahrez is a great example. If you ever look at any of the interviews the Leicester players do, and they have those cheap questions like who's always late, and it's always like they always laugh, or who's getting fined the most. It's always Riyad Mahrez. I think there was probably an ill discipline off the pitch where, Ranieri probably let them get away with a lot because he would perform week in, week out. I remember listening to Danny Drinkwater talk one time, and nearly the team talk before any Leicester game was like, Riyad, if you fancy it, like, we'll win the game. And if you look back to a lot of those games, he was the main man. Going then to City, where, like you said, they do have a whole host of world-class players that, he's probably not been the main man, and he's had to be, he's been rotated. He's probably been frustrated where it's probably cost him off the field in terms of, his discipline, maybe of turning up the time on training. And I think probably the penny has dropped with various different conversations he's had with Guardiola, that Guardiola's like, look, you have the ability. Listen to me. You need to work this bit harder doing X, Y, and Z, and I'll take you to the next level. Because I'm like, look, if Pep Guardiola calls you into his office, sits down and says, look, I need this, this, and this from you, you're going to listen. You're going to take note because of what he's achieved in the game, the players he's worked with. And I certainly think Mahrez is a prime example of someone who has listened over time, rather than if the penny had dropped maybe 2 years ago, we would have seen this impact that he's having, this season earlier. Certainly, look, he's an exceptional footballer. He's a great gift in being one of those players that can beat someone 1v1 in tight areas. He's very comfortable dribbling. Like, he's predominantly left foot, but look at the amount of times you see him coming on his left, cut back onto his right, and he can create something. He's an exceptional player with bundles of talent.
I know the second goal last night's a tap in, but it's a lung busting run where you're in a defensive set, and all of a sudden you realise that 2 quick passes from Kevin De Bruyne, and if you just make that far post, Phil Foden's going to put it on a plate for you. Like, it seems easy. It seems really easy because there's literally one touch and it's in the back of the net. But you've got to make that run a lot in those games, and mostly you don't end up with a tap in at the far post. But having the confidence in your teammates, that's just a sign of a team playing really well together and a certain amount of confidence. The question coming out of that is, though, who do you want in a one-off game in the final? Do you want a Chelsea team who know you intimately, or do you want a Real Madrid side who will feel that actually, because they're Real Madrid, you might be underdogs? What do you want?
I was asked this, and everyone now is tipped City kind of to win it, and obviously the next semi-finals tonight, and you kind of go Chelsea, Real, what do you fancy? Real just know the Champions League. They know how to win it. Of course, look, they had great success under Zidane. We know that. I know they don't have Ronaldo anymore, but they just know how to win games in the Champions League. They'll be going in thinking this is just another one for us. City, on the other hand, could look at Chelsea. Like you said, Chelsea know us intimately. Likewise, do City know Chelsea intimately. I think it would be a fitting one for Pep, thinking like, if we got Chelsea, they knocked them out in the FA Cup, that there'd be kind of a bit of revenge. I think Pep got his team wrong that night. He should have played whenever they played Chelsea, I think it was 5 o'clock, but he should have played his strongest 11. That side we saw last night, because it was Leicester v Southampton. Of course, he has an exceptional squad. It's a very difficult one. Either team are going to be up for it. I think you probably want Chelsea more than you'd want Real Madrid. That's just my kind of gut feeling, thinking, Real Madrid just know what the Champions League is about. Those players would be comfortable being in that situation of playing in a Champions League final. I know they have some young and upcoming talent in that squad as well, but a lot of them, like your Ramoses, Benzema's, Cruz, Modric, they've all been there. They're all tried and tested. They've won several Champions Leagues. So it's not going to feel any different to them. Of course, Manchester City, we've seen the scenes last night after the final whistle win, how excited they are. But it's like, hold on a minute. Like, yes, it's fantastic to be in the final, but you've not won it yet. You don't want to come this far and throw hard to courses on BT speaking about like this club is gone through so much with the highs and lows, but this is a team that wants to be winning Champions League finals, not just getting there. So if I was to pick one or the other, I'd probably prefer, if I was a Manchester City player, to play Chelsea over Real Madrid.
And there's also kind of a revenge mission element to it after the FA Cup semi-final. And what we've seen over the last week, Pep Guardiola, when he's got a bit of information on a team, he tends to do pretty well with that information.
No, definitely. Look, I think with the Chelsea game, I think he got his team selection wrong. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Like, that I'm saying about Pep Guardiola getting it wrong. But if you look at it kind of, Ferran Torres, Sterling played or whatever, and they were just, you could see that they weren't kind of, that match speed of kind of playing week in, week out, or playing a lot of regular football. I think Sterling's been very hot and cold this season. If you had played Riyad Mahrez, etc., would have been totally different. So I think if they did get Chelsea, then he would definitely obviously play strongest 11. I think they would be too good for Chelsea.
Their winning run now is the longest run by any team by any English team, I should say, in the history of the European Cup or the Champions League. It's 7 consecutive wins at this point. The question will still remain about whether or not this is the best Manchester City team of this era. There will be people who will cling to the notion of Kompany and Silva and Aguero at their peak as a team that can never be usurped. But this team, surely, David, if they win this Champions League, have to be the best Manchester City team of all time.
No, they have to be. You're right, because you don't win the Champions League by not being, the best team in Europe. Of course, look, if you listen to Pep last night, he spoke about various different finals where there's key moments. And even in the game last night, if Marquinhos' header goes in, if the handball is given, of course, look, it's not a handball, but those moments matter, that, they can flip a tie on its head. And, they're now in the final. If they go on and they win it, it has to be regarded. I think there's just that kind of love affair with Kompany, Silva, Aguero, Yaya Toure, those players who were there for so many years, who, started off their trophy haul of winning all the Premier Leagues and FA Cups, etc. But if this team go and win the Champions League alongside the Premier League, then it has to be regarded as the best Manchester City team of all time.
The one caveat to all this is that we're at the 5th of May now, and the final isn't until the 29th. If you remember back to the Liverpool Spurs game, both teams played really badly because I think they weren't match fit anymore. They kind of that level of sharpness that we saw from them in the semi-finals in particular, that had kind of faded a little bit. It's very hard to keep at that absolute lung-busting and sharpness for such a period of time. So that's the one issue that you would just be a little bit concerned about City, where they're so far ahead against whoever comes through in the other semi that actually that will be neutralised and it becomes very much a 50-50 one-off final.
Oh, definitely. Look, I remember the Champions League final, Madrid, obviously, with Liverpool. Liverpool did have a game plan, though. They wanted Spurs to have the ball and kind of frustrate them and catch them on the counter-attack. Of course, Liverpool scoring early gave them something to hold on to, especially after losing to Madrid the year before. But I just think with Pep's squad of players that they can just rotate and he can keep everyone happy. And I think the level he, as a manager, is at, that he'll have them relaxed, he'll have them focused, he'll have them ready. That I still expect, City, whoever they play, will come out and play this football. Like I don't expect them to play a performance like they did last night. I think if they got ahead in the final, then they would shut up shop. But we hope, whether it be Chelsea or Madrid, Chelsea, of course, look, are still out for top 4. Anything, I suppose, could happen if they went on a bad run of form. Real Madrid are battling out for La Liga, which is, very exciting, with Barca playing Atletico this weekend. So they kind of, it's very hard to say which way, because we don't know how the result will go tonight, but you'd still expect some bit of quality, Jer. You've got to be hopeful. That's what I'd be hoping anyway. And
look, I've just checked the fixtures there. I think the Premier League runs for a week longer this year anyway, so there is at least an extra match for them to keep that match fitness.
But still, you're right in what you're saying, because like you even looked at it last night, one City scored a second goal. Like Zinchenko was on a yellow card, Bernardo Silva was on a yellow card. You kind of get them off. And of course, it's going to be in the players' minds. Maybe, like I said, Real Madrid might be the only team who won't be too focused about it. But players will not want to get injured because they know this is the biggest opportunity they're going to have of winning the Champions League. So the way they train might be a bit different, in the sense of if they're the level they're at, in terms of their, how hard they're working, fellas will tone it down a little bit, because they'll be half cautious of, picking up a knock, picking up an injury, even in games, stuff like that. It will be interesting to see how it unfolds, but I still expect Pep to get them ready, obviously.
Saturday at 5:30, Manchester City against Chelsea in the Premier League will be a very, very interesting fixture if Chelsea get through here. I mean, if I'm Guardiola, I'm picking my full team and I'm going out and I'm crushing them and I'm saying, that's what it's going to be like in 3 weeks' time, lads.
But look, Pep is in a very comfortable position in the Premier League, because they're going to win it eventually. It's just how soon they want to win it. Now, he could go and put a marker down. And obviously, like you said, play the exact same 11. But he'll be also conscious, like, maybe not, because like maybe give the, rotate the squad, keep doing what he's been doing. Like we've seen that in the past. As frustrating as it is to watch, I think he'll rotate his squad again. He'll keep changing. He'll bring, probably Sterling will start, Rodri will come straight back in, and Cancelo will come in. He'll probably play Cancelo and Mendy will play. Do you know what I mean? He'll make, tweaks. But he'll also be looking at it in the case of, I need to get the rest of the squad up to full speed so that I have a full, 22, 23 players to choose from. At the moment, this is kind of his tried and tested team, but you never know, over the next coming weeks, somebody could put their hand up and put in some serious performances. He'll be obviously conscious that, look, he's been in this situation. I know it's been 10 years since he's been there, but he's been there before.
David, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
David Meyler with the insights there this morning for you here on OTB AM. You can keep your comments rolling in on 0879 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number, or of course on the YouTube channel as well. We'll get to them. Some interesting stuff coming in about your thoughts about free-to-air, pay-per-view and all that kind of stuff. Up next, we're talking Kerry in our contenders series with Sean O'Sullivan. We're going to hear from Ireland's relay stars, and the Type 5 Lions draft is coming a little bit later on with Neil Treacy. Stay tuned.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
For people to look at Roy Keane and say they're not going to take him because of what he might say as a pundit is ludicrous. It's ridiculous. How are you not going to have a player like that, a manager like that who's had the career he's had, and not try and tap into that to help your team? They're missing a trick. All of them who's not taking them, missing a trick.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
So 12 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. The Taoiseach Micheál Martin was with us for almost an hour last night in studio. You can catch that back on our YouTube channel or on the OTB Sports app and all the other usual OTB places. We want to bring you this part of the conversation about PE. Have a look.
France, 108 hours per year PE. Austria, 102 hours per year PE. Portugal, 90 hours. I'll skip the rest. Ireland, 37 hours per year. 4th worst in Europe.
Yeah, that's not good enough.
It's a time bomb.
Yeah.
It's like you're talking about priorities and we've got to sort this out and, you've got to take something out. We have to take things out to stop this situation continuing as it is. Where are we going to be in a decade?
But we also have to bring in more structured PE, in terms of the way the primary cycle develops. You have the one master teacher, if you like.
Well, could I suggest a simple-ish solution that you in 3, 4, 5 years we could be up and running with this? Have a designated PE teacher for one school or 2 or 3 schools, like the GAA officer goes around. I mean, you could train them, get them out the door within 2, 3 years.
That's what I was coming to.
Yeah.
I think you're going to need that at primary level to get the buy-in of schools and to get the consistency in schools on a year-to-year basis, and not just be depending on the one teacher. If that teacher moves on or that teacher moves to a different area, then it falls down.
Yes.
So you will need that structured kind of PE input at primary level and additional hours as well to get to up our performance in respect of that. And I think one of the great negatives of our performance has been our focus on the sports thing side of PE and on the game, so to speak, to the neglect of the wider aspects of physical development, fitness, linked into nutrition and well-being. I've met Neil Moyne, I've discussed this with him, particularly at second level, and his ideas around that, and education more generally. His view, I think, he had a view generally that you should combine it into a sort of a sports science or a type of program at second level, for example, where you combine a number of disciplines in terms of people's appreciations of the multidisciplinary nature of a lot of this. But at primary level, I get your point here.
Yeah, so Taoiseach Micheál Martin in conversation with Joe Malloy last night, and you can watch the full thing on the OTB Sports app. And a reminder to turn on your notifications on the OTB Sports app, so the next time the Taoiseach is in studio talking about PE or free-to-air broadcast rights, you'll be able to tune in straight away. Owen, what did you make of this?
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, obviously, that is a massive public health conversation. It's not a sporting conversation. It is possibly the single most important thing you could ask the Taoiseach about when it comes to sport. Like, the balance of PE to other subjects is ridiculous when you think about it. Like, I'm not familiar. I obviously don't have a child in school at the moment, but like, I've heard that religion and its ratio to PE is something like 3 to 1 at the moment is it a primary and at secondary school level, or at least a primary school level. Like, that's a balance that needs to be addressed, if not tipped completely in favour of PE. There are like that texter that we started the show off this morning, apologies for not remembering his name, but he suggested...
Dermot Looney.
Dermot Looney. Dermot made the point that about a full PE curriculum. Like, how many people are actually aware of what the full PE curriculum actually entails, and in how many places is that actually being carried out? That must be a real frustration, that there is a full curriculum that exists there and it's not being carried out because nobody's been bothered to actually address the balance. Nobody's been bothered to actually give PE enough time. It has been an easy way of, I guess, shoehorning more classroom minutes into certain subjects to keep everybody happy. But this needs to completely flip, that PE needs to be the most important thing. It needs to be detached completely from competitive sport, because that is how PE is often being taught. It's like, you may have a lazy teacher and suddenly it's five-a-side indoor soccer and half the people are just disinterested in it. Disassociating it from competitive sport is probably an important step in that. And part of doing that is maybe following that curriculum, whatever's in that curriculum, because I don't know what it is.
Well, look, he talks, there's a really interesting thread on Twitter, which I, instead of liking, will now retweet from the OTB Sports account. So you can all have a read of that, right? So he's talking about, he's a primary teacher in a Desh school, and the actual curriculum itself includes loads of other things as well, not just games and athletics, but aquatics, dance, outdoor and adventure and gymnastics as well. And he talks about the Active Flag programme, talking about the need to foster relationships with local sports partnerships through the council, and then also with local clubs as well. And saying that actually having an external PE teacher come in might not be the panacea. It'd be much better if every teacher was given the opportunity within the existing framework to deliver more than an hour a week. So if you were to triple it to 3 hours a week, then you probably wouldn't actually need that 4 or 5 year lead-in time to get those extra teachers and those extra resources committed. Because let's face it, the government are going to have a lot of calls on their finances over the next while, depending on how Europe decides how much debt we can all build up as countries in the aftermath of paying for COVID, right? So there might not be a lot of money. Is there another way to do this? There actually is. Where in the current curriculum could you cut down some time? What could you do?
I think we've already addressed that in the one subject that gets a little bit too much airing in religious education.
But the schools are owned by the church.
There is a big problem, and trying to cut that down raises political problems for a lot of different schools.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. Like, unless parents are happy, unless this is what you want for your kids, if you want your kids to be spending more time reading, learning and being taught about religion than being active, that's your choice. That's a choice you're making as a parent, because unless you agitate for it, nothing's going to happen. So it's actually up to the parents. And, you know, it's great that the Taoiseach says the situation is wrong. He could fix it in the morning. He could say that we need to have at least equality between religion and physical education and well-being and all the other stuff, that the sports science that comes into this too. But, you know, it's actually, there is an easy fix staring us in the face, but also parents need to agitate for this, because if you don't make the change, if you don't be the agent of change, nothing's going to happen. So I do feel like it's up to politicians to lead and show leadership, and that was a point that Micheál Martin made about the whole, there needs to be leadership from the Department of Sport. But parents need to stand up and be counted as well, because you're making the choice by sending your kids to religious schools and saying, I'm fine with how the curriculum is being taught. Get involved with the parents committee and say, no, hang on a second, why are we only doing 1 hour a week? We could do more. Where's the time going to come from? It's going to come from religion. That's where it's going to come from. Because I want my kids to learn Irish and science and maths and English. But, you know, teach your religion after hours, because we're the taxpayers paying for these. The taxpayers paying for religion to be taught, to be prioritised, instead of the physical well-being of our population. That's a decision that we have influence over, that we could change straight away, that wouldn't require 3 to 5 years of students being taught and a new curriculum being evolved and developed. And if you look at some of the nonsense that's being taught in religion, have you seen that stuff that's doing the rounds from the latest books that are being printed? In 2021, they're teaching homosexuality as a sin. Like, good people.
Wow. I have not seen that picture that's doing the rounds.
20 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. If you've got thoughts about this, if there's anything you'd like to get involved. Anyway, sorry. Maybe most schools aren't teaching that. Maybe most schools aren't teaching that. That was the Pope, who owns schools essentially, who said that recently. Of course, what they are teaching. I'll find the exact thing, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. But
it is such an important conversation. Like, I think as well, there's also what happens then when you free up that time, and I think parents can have a role in that as to what the curriculum entails. Like, the curriculum that you outlined there from that thread is a way more vibrant physical education curriculum than I'd say a lot of people would have had experience of in Irish schools. And how much has that changed since maybe a lot of the viewers this morning would have been in school? Like, it doesn't seem that there's been a rapid change over the last 10, 15 years, you know?
Puberty is a gift from God. We are perfectly designed by God to procreate with him. That's from the new Relationships and Sexuality course for Catholic primary schools.
Right. Jesus.
Obviously, you know, there's more apparently. So, we pick to teach that instead of teaching calisthenics and gymnastics and how to do a cartwheel. These are your options. These are the things that we're volunteering for.
Yeah, just it kind of comes back to being maybe quite happy to submit to that sort of thing as well. At a certain level of education, get it. I don't have first-hand experience of it, but get your kid into a school. Don't complain about the situation that exists within the school, but maybe this is more of a national conversation as well.
Yeah, okay. Right, that took us down a little bit of a tangent, but I think the key point is that we need to do more gymnastics, right? And we need to do more physical education, and certainly if there is going to be outside help for those teachers who need it, great, and that investment needs to happen. But more importantly, we need, as a society, to decide that that's what we want to do. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can, of course, get in touch with us on the YouTube channel. youtube.com/offtheball is the bit there, and you should subscribe to that, and of course you should turn on your notifications for the OTB Sports apps. We are going through a series of Gaelic football season previews, and we're trying to find which of the teams are going to be contenders. So you did Tyrone while I was off, did you?
We didn't do Tyrone yet, no. They're still up in the air whether or not they're a contender. We've done Donegal and Mayo, so we've picked out 2 counties who might be able to win Sam Maguire. I don't know where we've got this morning's county from, though.
It's Kerry.
Yeah.
It is the kingdom. It is the aristocrats of Gaelic football who used to have the home of the greatest team of all time, but now, unfortunately, that has moved to the capital. I'm delighted to say Sean O'Sullivan is with us this morning to help us preview the Kerry season. Sean, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, Ger. Hi, Eoin. Thanks for having me, lads.
Owen is desperately trying to talk down Kerry's chances this year, so we wanted somebody to come on and tell us the truth about what's going on. Somebody with like their boots on the ground. What level of excitement is there, first off, before we get into this, about what Kerry might be capable of doing in this year's championship?
Well, I think there's a level of excitement, Ger, that we're back. Obviously, the league is nearly upon us next weekend, the 15th, isn't it? We've Galway at home, so we're just excited to be back and to see what Kerry can bring to the table. We have to believe we're contenders. We believe that every year. We believed that last year. Obviously, it didn't work out as we had planned. It was a very, very disappointing premature end to a season that was full of hope for us. So looking forward to this year, we have to just wipe the slate clean. I'm sure management and players had a very, very good look at themselves. They've certainly had a lot of time to have a look at themselves and figure out what went wrong above in Páirc Uí Chaoimh against Cork in the Munster Championship, and hoping to right a lot of wrongs from that, and just approach 2021 like, as I said, a clean slate for everyone. They've injected a few new faces into the squad. They've given one particular member of their management team a little bit more responsibility, especially in terms of their forward play. So they have definitely looked at a few things within their camp that obviously they weren't happy with, and they're just going to try and get back to hopefully where they were a couple of years ago. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that they drew with Dublin in an All-Ireland final, so haven't turned into a bad team overnight. That old cliche will be thrown out, but they have to go and prove it.
The extra responsibilities on Maurice Fitzgerald.
It is, Eoin, yeah. So obviously, look, Kerry lost Tony Buckley from their management team. That's been well, I was going to say it's been well publicised. I suppose people have been trying to find out why and so on, but Kerry have kept pretty quiet on I suppose, what went on behind closed doors with that one. So anyway, he's moved on to Monaghan. And there was rumblings of different people coming in. I know Paul Galvin was mentioned in that conversation. I felt that would have been a good move for both parties. Unfortunately, didn't work out for Paul in terms of logistically. He's moved to the west of Ireland, and it just couldn't work out. So rather than, I suppose, bringing in somebody then for the sake of it, they've just given Maurice more responsibility in terms of the coaching side of things. I know he was primarily in as obviously selector and responsible for team selection, along with Peter and James Foley, but he was also brought in obviously to work with the forwards. But from what I gather now, he's been given a more overall responsibility in terms of the team. So again, I don't know the ins and outs that own. As you can imagine, Kerry keep things very, very close to their chest, and we'll have to wait and see what kind of influence that extra responsibility that Maurice has been given has on the team going forward.
One of the questions that we're asking in this contender series is then what's the identity of the team, and it'll be very difficult for us to really establish what that is. Maybe this championship, because it's such a blitzkrieg championship, there's no back doors, there's far fewer games. Will we get to see much, do you believe, from the team in terms of the patterns of play that they're trying to establish over the course of the league? Or, again, is everything under the cover of darkness?
Good question, Ger, because you see, you're it's very, very difficult because you're just so restricted with time. You're trying to, they're back training now since last Monday, and you're trying to tick a lot of boxes in a short period of time. I don't think that no team will have the time to try and reinvent the wheel. They're going to stick to their strengths, and try and perfect those as much as possible, and obviously work on what isn't so good. But you won't have the time to overly drastically change your identity, as you call it, or your game plan, or how you want to approach it. Obviously, what opposition you meet will have a big say in that as well, in terms of how they set up and your analysis on them. But the Kerry identity, it won't change. I mean, I was lucky enough to go in and be in at their last league game against Donegal and Tralee last year, when they clinched the league title. Actually, they won it, and won quite convincingly. Now, you have to take a lot of things into account here. Donegal came down to Tralee with a fairly scratched team because they were out the following week against Tyrone in the championship. So that was fair enough. But I definitely saw Kerry. I thought I saw a new Kerry that day in terms of the way they set up when they didn't have the ball, and still managed to. I mean, they blitzed Donegal. They put up a big score, even though they played very, very defensively when they didn't have the ball, particularly their forwards. Their forwards really impressed me that day. Their work rate, there was no crowd, so you could hear the communication. The real leaders in that forward line barking orders to get back into position and to defend high up the field. And I came away from Tralee that day thinking, geez, you know, this is the new Kerry. This is going to be hard to beat if we can get this right. And obviously, for whatever reason, we got the defensive part right above in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, but we just didn't get the forward part right. So, and that can happen. So I think the Kerry identity has changed a little bit. And I think they won't veer away too much from that. They'll still be very, very difficult to play against when they don't have the ball, but they're obviously going to be looking for their key men up front to have a better day out than they did in Cork last what was it, November?
Yeah, like the thing is the idea of Kerry playing 5 forwards that night against Cork is something that has pissed off a lot of people in the aftermath, and it fits in perfectly with this identity question, Sean. Like, have Kerry strayed too far from their identity by playing 5 forwards in a game against Cork, a game they're expected to win?
I think I wouldn't say they strayed too far from it, but I think certainly maybe in the Cork game, they didn't have to go to those levels. No, I don't think so. Kerry, I felt, were well capable of beating Cork if they went and played their normal style and attacked Cork. You know, you got to give credit to Cork. They stuck in there. They got their goal with the last kick of the game. You know, and I'm sure the plan for Cork was to stick in there as long as possible. And if they were in the game in the last 10 minutes, then so be it. But I firmly believe that if Kerry had maybe just thrown off the shackles a little bit and gone for it, then they would have had the capabilities of beating Cork. Now, in saying that, on the night, you know, they just had some very, very off performances, particularly from their forwards. Even if they were playing with 5 or 4 or whatever it was at times on, they made poor decisions. They took on, difficult scoring opportunities, wrong shot selection, and as bad as they looked on the night, and as badly as they played on the night, if they had taken maybe a couple of more correct decisions inside in the final third, they probably would have got out there with a win, and who knows, you know, maybe would have driven on a little bit and possibly got to an All-Ireland semi-final. So I just think on that night they got a lot right in terms of their new identity and how they wanted to set up. But when you're setting up like that, you need your talisman up front to get to the scores, and you need to be really making a mark every time you get into the opposition final third, and Kerry didn't do that enough on the night. That's definitely something I'm sure they've looked at. Will we see during the league if they've worked enough on it? I hope so. So it remains to be seen, but definitely it's an area that they will have to improve on if they are going to continue with that style, which I think they will.
One of the things we're asking everybody is some of the new talent that's coming into the squads. I know Paul O'Shea, who's a cousin of David Clifford, is training with the seniors. Is he the one that excites you the most of the new cohort? Because I know you've been involved in development squads, so it'll be good to get a bit of insight into some of these lads.
Yeah, I had Paul at development squad. I'm actually part of Declan O'Sullivan's under-20 management team this year, and Paul is still an under-20. So we'll be hoping he doesn't play too well for the seniors, maybe that one. No, Paul is a very, very good talent. What are his strengths? He's very stylish. He would remind you very much of David Clifford in that ilk. He's just very, very comfortable on the ball. An excellent pair of hands. He can play, I suppose, in a variety of positions. I've seen him operate at midfield. I've seen him operate on the 40. He's played for his club in the inside line as a target man. So he's definitely one for the future, and does excite down here. Just haven't seen probably enough of him at a higher level. I've seen him in county championship games. He's obviously played at minor, won an All-Ireland at minor, and played last year under 20. So look, obviously it's a huge step up for him. Will we see him in action during the league? It remains to be seen. So he's definitely one that stands out, and we'll be looking forward to see how he copes with intercounty football. But he's a good guy. He's got a good attitude, and look, the talent is there. The question is, can he bring it on up through the levels?
Sean, you mentioned the under-20s there. I haven't heard any finalised decision on what's happening. What are you planning for? What do you think might happen?
Sure, it's incredibly frustrating. And look, I'm not going to use this platform this morning to vent about the under-20s, because you asked me on to talk about the Kerry seniors. But we're very, very frustrated, Ger. The under-20 and the minor grades, in my opinion, have taken an awful hammering during this. And before people start maybe thinking that I'm just trying to cry off my own pulpit here, I'm not. I understand everybody's suffering through this thing, particularly sports people, and wanting to get back out there. But we've been left in the dark completely. Absolutely completely. We have, even as late as yesterday evening, I was texting contacts that you gather from your playing days, who you know are involved in discussions. I won't name names, but trying to find out. I mean, the under-20s haven't even been told, can we go into pods next week? Adult training is back in pods next week. An inter-county under-20 setup, which would be ran very professionally, are still in the dark. We've no idea. We're still waiting on clarification, and we're being told clarification is coming. So you asked me, what are we planning for? Our players have been on a return to play program since last January. We've been doing monitored Zoom calls with them twice a week. They've been doing their own individual running sessions. I have to say, our provisional panel, every guy to a man has bought into it. It's very frustrating. You see guys up in college dorms using books for heel raises, for calf raises, for it's terrible to see, guys inside in their dorms in college trying to use everything they have, trying to do, exercises that we prescribe them off chairs and beds and so on, So, and again, please, I'm not, playing a little violin here for the Kerry under-20s or for anyone. I'm just trying to find out, and we are trying to find out, why these age groups have been completely bypassed. And I was listening to your discussion on physical education before I came on, and I mean, like, they're two primary groups that, these guys are 17, 18, 19, 20 years of age. They need to be out, they need to be active, they need to be moving. We get messages from the lads every day. When are we back? When can we go onto a field? When can we kick a bit of ball? And we can't give them an answer. So sorry for going off on a tangent there, but it's very frustrating.
No, it's very similar to the conversation that we had with Bernard Flynn, who's involved with the Meath under-20s a couple of weeks back after his Laker Gale. Like, yep. I know it's difficult to manage everything that's happening, but in terms of an age group, and particularly at club level as well, that actually desperately needs an outlet for physical activity after a couple of years. The other thing is that the long-term relationship that you have with the sport, it's generally around the memories that you form around games. It's not around the constant training sessions that you do. Absolutely. And I mean, these guys are looking, the social part of it as well, Ger. These fellas are in college, or they've been doing online college now for how long? They haven't even been able to go into their lectures. Just getting to meet up with, lads that they would have played minor with or played minor against, and even on the Zoom groups, we have a bit of crack. We try and keep it. We've the group split up into four. Each coach takes a group, and with my group, I would have done a jersey night. Pull out your, all these lads have a good selection of jerseys, whether they be football, soccer, Australian rules, whatever. Pull out your best jersey, and we'll have a bit of crack. You're just trying to keep the interaction with them, but it gets to a stage where even that loses its effect. And you're right. I played 3 years under 21 with Kerry, and you don't remember the training sessions. You remember, All-Ireland semi-finals and All-Ireland finals, and getting to see your friends. And look, that's all we're looking for. But the first step on that is, please tell us where we're at, and at least then we can go back to these young fellas and say, we're either good to go, or unfortunately,
we're not good to go yet, but we are good to go whenever. And at least we have some bit of clarification for them, because it's driving them mad now at the moment.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, I'm glad you brought us on that tangent, because I think it's important, particularly in light of the conversation that we were having last night with Micheál Martin, and we're going to continue to be having over the next while on the show as well. Just one last point about Kerry for me in terms of what you think might be realistic this year. While last year the Munster Football Championship was obviously a disaster, you would expect this year with the league and the summer and the opportunity for better weather, we still expect Kerry to come through that. I think there'll be harder games, and Cork will have a say, and you would expect Tip to have a say this year too. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. We would expect Kerry to get over Clare, and hopefully that'll give them an opportunity to display their best. They have to consider themselves All-Ireland contenders, and they have to consider themselves capable of winning a semi-final against whoever comes out of Ulster. Do they believe that they're as good as this Dublin team at the moment? That's the big thing that everybody has. Or do they believe that they have a plan that can negate the strength of Dublin?
I think they do, but at the same time, I don't, because based on last year, I don't think they can look that far ahead, Ger, yet. That's probably one of the criticisms that was thrown at them last year, in that because they were changing their style, that they were looking down the road at a Dublin, because obviously it was all geared up for a Kerry Dublin final. So I think they've got burnt there, so they can't look too far ahead. But certainly I agree with you. I would expect Kerry to come out of Munster this year. They have Clare, they have a semi-final then, which they should be winning. Is it the winners of Waterford and Limerick, is it? Sorry, I know that evades me. I have it on my phone there. But anyway, it's all geared up to a final against Cork and Killarney. Again, Tipperary, we all saw what they did last year. They'll be pouring again to show it wasn't a fluke. So they have to be in the conversation as well, of course. But I would expect Kerry to come out. And yes, then they have the Ulster champions. Kerry have to be looking at an All-Ireland final. They have to be. Are they close to Dublin? Do they believe they can negate Dublin, as you said? They have to believe that, but they just have to take it one game at a time, because I think last season all the talk was about this Kerry-Dublin final, potential Kerry-Dublin final, and it came back to bite us in the backside. So they can't get carried away, but I certainly would expect them to have enough to come out of Munster, yeah.
Sean, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks a million.
Sean O'Sullivan there giving us some insight into the situation in Kerry, and also the continuing lack of clarity about what the situation is with regards to the under-20 inter-county season, and whether or not we're actually going to have, or what kind of a season we might have, or when it might happen. It's 8:43. You're watching OTB AM. A reminder, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're about to be joined by John Duggan with this morning's sports news. The main story this morning is the sad passing of former Ireland midfielder Alan McLaughlin. His teammates Andy Townsend, Packy Bonner and Ray Houghton joined Joe on the football show last night. Here's a quick taste of that conversation as Ray Houghton remembered Alan McLaughlin.
We went out as a group. We looked after each other. And regardless who's in that starting 11, we wished everyone the very best. And if you came off and someone came on in your place, you were wishing them to go out there and do exceptionally well. That's why it was quite unique. And that's why we had such a great understanding. And we were running through the old adage about running through a brick wall for your teammates. That was us. That was Alan. Alan was certainly that type of individual. And as I say, after he's footballer, when we met him, Andy will tell you when you met him, he loved talking about football. He was so passionate about it. He was a real football man.
Yeah, absolutely, a real football man. The two lads went on to have great stories there. I missed the Packy Bonner bit, but I'm going to go back and listen to it on the OTB Sports app after the show this morning, because I think Alan McLaughlin is one of those careers that we probably underappreciated. 40 odd caps for the Republic of Ireland. John Duggan is with us this morning. John, good morning to you.
Ger, Owen, how are we doing?
Yeah, 40 odd caps. It's loads of people get 20, 25 caps for Ireland, but he got 40 caps at a time, as we were saying earlier on with David Meyler, where Townsend was there, one of the best midfielders in England at the time. A young Roy Keane was emerging onto the scene. He still had to deal with the odd time where Jack Charlton would decide that his midfielder du jour was going to be Paul McGrath. So, that's testament to his battling qualities.
Absolutely, Ger, and also there weren't as many matches back then. There weren't as many friendlies. You didn't have Nations League games. I knew Alan. I knew him. He was a gentleman. I worked with him on commentaries. I found him very unassuming, very, very much a straight talker, very diligent. Always did his prep for the commentaries, and gave us always a really good insight into the game. And it's just terribly sad. He's the first of that generation to pass, and we grew up with that. Those of us who were lucky enough to do so, who were lucky enough to be old enough to do so, we grew up with that generation, and they're not young anymore. And he's 54, though, is a very young age, and just our condolences to his family and his friends. And that iconic moment in Belfast, it was a toxic environment up there that night. It was the dark days of the Troubles. And Alan came on. We were 1-0 down. We were going out of the qualification picture for the World Cup, and then he produced that amazing goal. That at that time, I think as supporters, we always felt that this team would find a way, and Alan's goal was the way, the pathway to USA '94. And he was in and out of the squad. He came on for his first ever cap in a World Cup game in 1990 against England. But then would do well under Mick, and Mick's first go at it in the qualification campaign for '98, and had a good club career as well at Swindon, Portsmouth, and Southampton. It's very, very sad news. And I grew up with Noel Gallagher. I grew up in Main Road area of Manchester, and was on the books at Manchester United, and in recent years was an academy coach at Swindon. Just a very sad day. The commentary of the goal is great, because you can hear in the background the crowd as it's actually free kick gets whipped in, and you can hear the Northern Ireland, and you can hear it, and then suddenly dead silence, absolute dead silence, because there's nobody in that ground celebrating. I mean, I think there are stories of some people smuggling themselves in and pretending to be Northern Ireland fans, but they sure as hell weren't making themselves known as the goal hits the back of the net, and it's absolute stunned silence. It was complete silence, apart from everybody in their living rooms south of the border. And if you were a Republic of Ireland fan that night, you would not be celebrating. It would not be in your best interest to do so. It was a very, very tense environment. And you could feel the tension in your living room. You could really feel that this was on a knife edge. And Northern Ireland obviously wanted to beat us. We'd hammered them in Dublin. We'd beaten them 3-0. And Jimmy Quinn scores a really good goal. And Alan knew Jimmy Quinn. He'd already known him as a player in their younger days. But the goal was of supreme quality. It was on the half volley and buried into the bottom corner. And just I just remember, as I was 14 years of age at the time, the pure ecstasy of we're there. And you can remember even the celebrations afterwards when the final whistle went. I remember Roy Keane was especially animated at the time, and everybody was around Alan, and that was his moment in the sun, and a moment he could never take away. It was just a brilliant moment in Irish sporting history. Yeah, no, and he didn't score again for Ireland, and there is a brilliant line in the commentary that Richie was talking about last night from George Hamilton. If he never scores again for Ireland, he'll be a hero for the rest of his life, and indeed that was the case. So, John, what else is going on today? Well, we have the Champions League obviously reaching the business end with Manchester City in the final for the first ever time. 2-0 win over Paris Saint-Germain last night, 4-1 on aggregate. Riyad Mahrez with both goals at the Etihad. PSG never really got into the game. Mbappe was injured and didn't play, and that obviously is a factor, but by the end of it, they were an absolute rabble, an absolute mess. You had Ander Herrera claiming that the referee was using bad language towards him, and Mahrez's positioning for both goals I thought was very good. City played within themselves, but Pep Guardiola has also come out and said that this run to the Champions League final, which he's finally got to at City, is not all down to money.
Of course, we invest money in the last decade since Sheikh Mansour took over the club. Of course it is, but it's not just like this. If the people want to believe it's just this money, it's okay, up to you. So, but there is a lot of incredible things behind the scenes, a lot of people working and supporting, and a clear strategy to do it, and that's why in the last 4 years, no, all decades. So in the last 10 years, if we win this Premier League, we win 5. So that means a lot.
So City now in the final against Chelsea or Real Madrid, who meet tonight, 1-1, tie nicely poised going into the game at Stamford Bridge, 8 o'clock start. Ramos is back and available for Real. Mateo Kovacic is injured for Chelsea, who have the away goal. A goal of straw will be enough for an all-English final in the Champions League in Istanbul. We had that fascinating interview and very interesting piece with Micheál Martin on Taoiseach with Joe last night on the programme, which you can all check out on otbsports.com and on the app. So many talking points. We had the issue around PE, levelling up the women's and men's playing field in terms of the support for the women's sporting environment. We had the League of Ireland supports, and also the return of fans outdoors. And Micheál was asked when that might happen.
We will be trialling some events. I think you're probably looking at July, and the government is working up plans now and over the next number of weeks towards that end.
Okay.
And also learning lessons from what's happened in the UK and what's happening in other jurisdictions to see how we can get fans back in a safe way.
Yeah, and so it won't be a case in July you have to have been vaccinated to go to a sporting event?
Well, I noticed in the UK they've done both vax and unvaccinated people coming in segregating them. So we will look at different options in that regard.
I found it absolutely fascinating that he said that it was unlikely that we could have a professional boxing fight here in the near future due to security concerns. I would hope the conditions would exist going forward where that can be resolved, because that's pretty mad that we can't do that.
Yeah, it is, and it's costing everybody the opportunity to see Katie Taylor in a big event. You know, it's kind of reached that point now in Katie Taylor's career where if she was to have a rematch against Natasha Jonas, for example, she could sell a big venue out, and it's preventing generations from watching her in person. You know, her career is going to pass by as a professional without the opportunity to, because of the bloody gangland feud that escalated at the Regency Hotel, and which we're still seeing the repercussions of on the front pages with continuing trials. So, yeah, bit of a disaster. There was loads in that, and I think that we're going to come back to the PE stuff, and the pay-per-view stuff is particularly interesting because it's all well and good opposition politicians saying something, but when the Taoiseach of the day is critical of the Sky deal with the GAA, or, for example, the IRFU putting the Six Nations or being involved in the putting of the Six Nations behind a paywall, then stuff happens pretty quickly. You know, that's like a government policy doesn't get dictated by stuff that is said in the media, but it certainly escalates the pace at which things happen.
It does, and I remember it was nearly 20 years ago that there was a brouhaha about FAI matches not being free to air for a certain point of time, and there very quickly was that they were back on terrestrial TV. Now Sky have them as well, but it is interesting that he is the top man, and actions follow words, because at the moment I do think sport is a really hot topic in people's minds because of the fact that I do think the world has changed. I do think there's a reaction against what I would call the neoliberalism of sport. And we're seeing that. We saw that the other day, the Manchester United-Liverpool game, like this thing about the All Blacks, part of the All Blacks being sold. I was reading Jay Monaghan, the PGA Tour commissioner, giving a warning to these potential players that could break away and form a Super League, which would be backed by the Saudis, that, you know, you'd be banned from the PGA Tour for the rest of your career and you wouldn't be able to play in the majors. There is at the moment a very interesting space and conversation around money in sport, and people and the fans owning that and being actually able to own their sport and reach it and grab it back a bit. And maybe we're seeing that in what politicians are saying, because they actually do have the power to legislate. So let you know as well that Oliver Dingley is qualified for the Olympics this morning. The diver reached the final in Rio in 2016. So well done, Oliver.
Yeah, friend of the show. I think Oliver Dingley was the very last person we had in studio before the pandemic.
Oliver Dingley and Kenny Cunningham were together in studio with us.
Right, yeah. The four of us were sitting here across. It was like, this doesn't feel very good, lads. You know, there's a global pandemic about to arrive. Maybe we should. And I was like, nah, it'll be grand.
Yeah.
Well, luckily none of you were in Cheltenham. That's all I can say.
You win that one. Fair enough. JD, good stuff. Thanks a million.
All right.
OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Delighted for Oliver Dingley. He is in Japan at the moment in that World Cup, and so he scored 399.75 in the 3-metre springboard preliminary round, finishing 15th to advance to the semi-finals and therefore qualify for Tokyo 2021. So, assuming the Olympic Games goes ahead, and I think it will, then we'll definitely have a diver there. We're also going to have a 4x400 metre mixed relay team. They have sealed qualification for the Tokyo Olympics, and I'm delighted to say we've got Sharlene, Mawdsley and Chris O'Donnell with us this morning to help celebrate the fact that they've qualified for the Olympic Games as well. So, Sharlene and Chris, good morning to you both. How are you doing?
Morning, Gerald. Not too bad.
So what's the level of excitement like at the moment, Sharlene?
Yeah, it's been unreal. Like, we're just home since yesterday, so it's all just starting to hit now. But yeah, it's just been amazing.
When you went out, you obviously had a fair idea that this was on the cards, but for it to be on the cards and for it to actually happen, they're two different things, because everybody has to perform, the baton has to be handed over properly, everything has to go pinpoint accuracy. So at what point do you realise that actually all the hard work has paid off?
Yeah, like, it's something that we've been targeting now for a couple of years. It's funny, so in 2019 we tried to qualify for the World Championships in Doha, so we went to Geneva for a race to qualify for that, and it got rained off like unbelievably, the worst storm imaginable, so that was a disaster. So when we got together, we really wanted to qualify for the Olympics, kind of make up for that. You know, our coach Drew Harrison was like, make up for Geneva here, and yeah, we went there with so much belief, and while we had so much belief, it's still a huge task at hand. You know, there were some huge countries in there with massive pedigree, but we just believed in ourselves, and we got there on the day, and we just gave it everything.
How often do you get to practice as a team?
Actually, not too often. There's not as much technical parts involved in the 4x400, luckily, whereas the 4x100 team have to practice quite a lot. But we did have a camp in Ireland. Now, not everyone was able to make it. We just had a training day just before we headed before the selection for World Relays. But then once we got over, we were there on Wednesday and we trained on Thursday, and we trained again just before, like, in the warm-up. But yeah, we didn't have much practice, but I don't think you need much practice. It's all kind of about the individual performance as a team on the day.
So it looks chaotic from the outside, so you're saying it's actually grand, really, from your perspective, being on the track just waiting for whoever is coming with the baton to get it.
Well, I definitely had a bit of a change in my Saturday heat to the final. You might have been able to see that in the heat. We were in really good contention and I didn't have to run wide, whereas in the final I had to run out to hand the baton over to Chris, which kind of adds in extra meters, and that's when you see the field just get that bit harder. So it is a bit technical, all right, but yeah, it's still okay.
What were you going to say, Chris?
Oh no, it's the technical side of things. I suppose you have your pace judgment as well. So this was the very first time any of us ran a mixed relay. So we'd always be in a male or female only relay. So this time it's a man handing over to a girl, and then a girl handing over to a boy. So you have to judge that different pace, and it's when the athlete coming in they could be going slower, they could be finishing very strong, and it's different in that regard for a male to judge the pace of a female coming in. So, but we did do some good practice in the warm-ups and that, and we were confident, and the changeovers went really well, thank you.
Over 400 metres also seems to be a relatively new thing for a couple of teammates as well. Sharlene, I know you've probably stepped up from 200 quite a bit, and Phil Healy in particular, we would have got to know her as a 100 and 200 metre runner, and now she's absolutely shooting the lights out at 400 level.
Yeah, definitely. I think the calibre in the 400 metres at the moment is just insane, and I think it's only going to get better now that we have qualified for the Olympics and people are going to want to make the team. For me personally, I moved up to the 400 because I got injured and I was kind of afraid to run fast. So the 400, people have always said it to me, like, oh, you'll be a great 400 metre runner. But it's a hard event, so I was trying to push it off for as long as possible. But I'm really glad I made the transition.
How do you mean you were afraid to run fast?
I got injured on my hamstring, and I was just afraid to like touch the muscles. Like, you know, I was afraid to run fast. So I started doing more endurance type training, and it kind of suited to me in the end.
It's not like the 400 is slow either, though.
No, but it's definitely not as quick as the 200. You wouldn't be going flat out the whole way, or you'd end up dying.
Chris, I'd say there's a few people in Sligo Rovers who are wishing they had you on the wing at the moment. I mean, like your football background is obviously the thing that put lightning on your feet.
Yeah, it's funny as well. I was talking to the Rovers manager, Liam Buckley. I used to train when I was in Sligo at the IT track, and they'd be on the pitch, and Liam said if I can head the ball, I'm in the team, so we'll see how that goes.
And where is the heading of the ball at the moment?
It's been a few years, to be honest. I'm not really allowed to even do as much of a kickabout these days with the risk of injury, but no, we'll see where we are at the end of this career.
Were you literally running rings around people when in your football heyday?
The tactics, I suppose. Yeah, I was on the wing and it was over the top, cross it in. Yeah, that was the plan.
Sharlene, you made the point there about everybody wanting to make the team. When will the team be finalised? When is the cut-off point, and when will you all know if you are? Obviously, the Ireland have qualified, making sure that you are the person who's representing the team. When does that get finalised?
I'm not actually too sure the exact selection dates, but all I know is that we're all going to try individually over the next couple of months to make sure that our place on the team is secured. Chris might know more when the actual official dates are of selection, but I'm not too sure. I'm just taking it one race at a time.
Yeah, it's now a case of just going back into our own individual bubbles. There will be no more mixed relay until Tokyo. So it's just a matter of us now getting as fast as possible over the next 2 months to give the team the best chance when we go to Japan.
When was the decision made to focus or even to enter this, and how much of your own training has been focused on this? I'll start with you, Chris, because I'm going to ask you both the same question. But so the whole notion of the 4x400 being an opportunity for Ireland to have a team at this Games, when was that first floated to you, and when did you go, yeah, I absolutely want to be part of this?
Yeah, this is the first time the mixed relay is in the Olympics, and we were always targeting. We knew we could get 2 good guys, 2 good girls on the team. So it's been in the pipeline for probably over a year now. But funnily enough, we still didn't actually know that we were going to go until probably only a month ago, because we had to get an invitation from World Athletics. So it was a bit nervy. We really just wanted to get there. So we're waiting for this invitation. And I remember the day we got it. We got the email through. Me and Sharlene were just texting each other like, oh, this is it now. We have to do it. And yeah, thankfully that all went really well, because World Relays was probably our only opportunity to qualify. We weren't going to, with all the individual commitments, we weren't going to get the 4 of us together again this summer. So the pressure on Saturday night was unbelievable.
That's cool. To come through that pressure, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. It was like do or die. So Saturday was really our cup final. We didn't run as well on Sunday. I think the emotional energy that Saturday took out of us, we just put absolutely everything into it, because it was literally, we needed to get top 8. We were 4th overall on Saturday, which was amazing, and 3rd semi-final. We were definitely in the hardest semi-final as well. So it was tough, but you know, absolutely all 4 of us and the subs as well, it has to be said. Andrew, Sophie were brilliant all weekend supporting us.
And Sharlene, from your perspective then, the decision to be involved in this, what's the story with your own individual, and how do you balance these 2 things?
Yeah, I think mainly your individual training carries forward to the mixed 4x400. It was actually funny, me and Chris were speaking about it just yesterday. He had messaged me in January 2020 and asked me would I be involved in the mixed 4x400. And it was just funny looking back on that, because as he said, we didn't know until a month ago that we were going to be going to World Relays. And, you know, like we're young athletes. It's been just a privilege to be there, and to say that we might be able to make the, you know, strike 4 for the Tokyo Olympics would just be insane for both of us.
Because it's like the full Olympics. It's not like, you know, you're not going kind of as a non-participant. You get to go, and it's the athletes' village, and whatever the opening ceremony looks like in Tokyo with COVID, etc. But you guys have just qualified for the Olympics. It's an incredible achievement.
Absolutely, and you know, credit has to go as well to our coach Drew Harrison and David McCarthy at home, who really drove it on. They never gave up, and they made sure that we were there in the best shape possible. And you know, the team meetings we had were so inspirational. I suppose me and Sharlene would be the two of the more inexperienced athletes of the team, but we had Phil Hilly and Thomas Barr there as well, who really drove it on, and we just knew, kind of get the baton to Tom on the last leg with just in contention, and his championship experience and know-how. I had faith that Tom would get us home.
Well,
what was Tom's story on Sunday?
Look, we have a squad. We've got a really good squad, and Andrew deserved his chance. Sophie ran in the 4x200, and there's every chance that Andrew can run in Tokyo, so the experience will do him really well.
Because I saw someone suggesting that there was some clash already earmarked in Tokyo. It's nothing to do with that. It's just to spread the experience around.
Yeah, well, we don't know. The mixed relay, I think, is on the same day as his 400-metre hurdles heats as well. Okay. So, look, Tom's job was just to get us to the Olympics, and thankfully he did a really good job at that. And we got Andrew Mellon as well, some really invaluable experience.
Sharlene, this is probably like a fairly broad question, but why do you think we've seen such a success in Irish athletics at 100, 200 and 400 level over the last 2 or 3 years?
I think the women in sport at the moment have just excelled massively. Like, we have a lot of support, you know, we have it from hersport.ie, we have it from loads of different people. And I think, like, just seeing something like we did at the weekend really drives people forward. I think that it doesn't stop just at the 100, 200 and 400. We have amazing girls in the 800 metres. We had 3 girls at the European Indoors competing in the 800 metres alone. So, you know, it really doesn't just stop at the sprint event, it's carrying the whole way through. And I think that's something that's really important to note.
It seems like a bit of a revolution, Chris, that the Irish sprinting at this moment in time. It's almost like a series of stories that, as a show here, we wouldn't almost be used to covering, because there wasn't an amazing amount of success up until a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and hopefully this is certainly only going to drive us on anymore. And the thing with relay is what we were talking about. It's sometimes hard to break into the championships, but once you're in, it's easier to stay in. So now we've not only qualified for the Olympic Games this year, we're also in the World Championships in 2022 in Oregon, and hopefully then from that it'll be another Olympics, another World Championships, European Championships. So now, as I said in a couple of interviews, we're really on the map now, and teams are going to know us, and that's only going to increase competition for places, and it'll bring myself and Sharlene on as well, and the rest of the team, and you should see hopefully a lot more success.
Yeah, no doubt, and it'll be great to see the Irish Vest in the Olympics on the track as often as we're going to see it this year. Chris and Sharlene, thanks a million for joining us this morning. Congratulations again, it's a great achievement. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. It is 7 minutes past 9. Neil Treacy is standing by to take us through his Lions selection with some controversy. Stay tuned.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
And I find myself during commentary, sometimes a thread will appear in my mind and it'll be like a worm. You know, it's there. I know this might happen and I've got it ready to go. And that would have been the nation holds its breath thing, because I couldn't have scripted that penalty in Genoa in 1990. And it just came to me in the moment. But it came to me because of all that I had done beforehand. And it was there ready to emerge at the right moment.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Right, 8 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or of course, you can leave a comment on the YouTube channel. It is our Lions special with Neil Treacy. Neil, you've picked the entire squad for us.
Oh, I have. And I sincerely regret suggesting I would do it as well, because it got to a stage last night I had sat down. The level of organisation here. What I did was, I'll show you some of them. I'm going to try block out some of the names before I reveal them. But for example, I have cue cards all over the place here.
Right.
I've got a cue card for each position. So I knew that, okay, loose head prop. I wrote down all the loose head prop contenders down there. I know I have to take 3 of them and jot down as well maybe a couple of +1s and +2s for late call-ups along the way if people get injured. But it got to a point I had 35 of my 36 names, and I sat looking at the second row cue card and looking at the last 2 names for probably 20 minutes before I eventually settled on one. And it was probably a cop-out, to be honest. I took the safe option. I'll reveal that when we get to it. But so much pressure. I can't imagine what poor Warren Gatland is going through.
What was your criteria when it came to selecting? You know, was it like they're going to be good around the place? They're going to be... What was it? They're going to be able to deal with the peculiar requirements of COVID and the bubble in South Africa? How did you lean? What was it? Game plan, game style, Warren Ball?
Well, I wasn't looking for characters anyway. Like I wasn't going like, all right, okay, we got to bring him. He's going to be social secretary, and he's going to be top of the bus telling the jokes every morning on the way to training. No, basically what it was, you want, as well as quality, you want a lot of versatility. Up front, I wanted really, really good scrummagers, because I think that's where you have to take on South Africa. You want big, powerful forwards, and I think that's what I've gone for. Decent bit of experience along the way then as well. A couple of younger guys who are bolters, although they've been well marked from a decent way out. But yeah, ultimately you want a lot of versatility because it's only a 36-man squad, which is lowest squad number since 1997. I remember looking to have it here. It was a 37-man squad in 2001, 2009 and 2013. 41 went to New Zealand in 2017. And then you had that ludicrous 44-man squad that Clive Woodward brought to New Zealand back in 2005 when he decided to just basically pick every fit and available player playing in the Northern Hemisphere. But yeah, 36 is a very, very low number of players for a tour of this magnitude. So you want a lot of players that can kind of multiply into a couple of different positions and cover you in that way. Okay. Did you include all those players who kind of went to the Last Lions tour but didn't? Did they all end up getting Lions caps, or were they official Lions? You know, the ones who were just holidaying on an island very close by and then all of a sudden flew in. It was like, oh, look at these guys. They're all Lions all of a sudden. I mean, I don't know. Will there be a bit of that going on this time? There can't, can there? As in, like, did I count that as Lions experience when I was picking it? Well, just in the numbers that you've tallied there, like... The 41. Oh no, the 41 for New Zealand. That was like that was the official squad that was named. Right. Okay. On, whatever, 8 weeks or 6 weeks out from the tour. Okay, so that actually bloated a bit more after that as well. Right, let's get into it. Okay, so loose heads. Will we fly through these, or do you want to do me the national jingoistic breakdown first? I'll read it out. Wyn Jones, Wales. No. So yeah, 3 loose head props. This was a Wyn Jones and Rory Sutherland. I thought were absolute bankers to make it. So Wyn Jones from Wales, Rory Sutherland of Scotland, and then I was pretty torn actually for a good while between Cian Healy and Ellis Genge, and just about fell on the side of Cian Healy for overall experience, and I think his scrummaging form over the last few months. Ireland had an excellent scrum in the Six Nations. England did not. Cian Healy was a big part of that. He was playing excellent rugby. I know he's 33 years of age and getting on a bit, but I think he's just about edging it for me. Ellis Genge probably came back into contention, I think, with his performance for Leicester Tigers against Ulster at the weekend. He was absolutely brilliant with ball in hand, around the park, making tackles, everything. But I just think Cian Healy's solidity at scrum time snuck it for me. Whichever one of those 3 is going to be starting in a test match, I haven't a clue, though, because it is very, very close between all of them. And even on Rory Sutherland, he would actually be a bit of a doubt to make it on the Lions tour at the moment. He's got a pretty bad shoulder injury, and it's touch and go whether he would be available to make his return in time for that warm-up game against Japan in Murrayfield in July. So if, for example, Rory Sutherland doesn't make it, Ellis Genge would be next cab off the ranks straight away. Okay. You've gone for 3 loose heads, 3 hookers and 3 tight heads. Who are your 3 hookers? 3 hookers are, again, the first 2 of them I thought were pretty easy to choose, and then I was humming and hawing on the last one, and ultimately sided with an Irish person because I'm biased, and I hate your favourite player. That's what I need to tell everyone. Just get that out of the way before they can accuse me. But yeah, I went for Ken Owens of Wales. That was a pretty easy choice. Jamie George as well, I think, was a pretty easy choice. And then I just about sided for Ronan Kelleher over Luke Cowan-Dickie. Like, in part, I would say it's because of it's a subconscious thing where I have seen a lot more Ronan Kelleher than I have of Luke Cowan-Dickie, and I think that's understandable. But I think particularly with Kelleher over the last couple of months, I know he only started one game for Ireland in the Six Nations, but he's an explosive player. He's a power player, and I think he's exactly the type of player that you would need down in South Africa, where you're going to be taking on a huge pack of forwards. I think his line-out throwing has come on, and he's an excellent scrummager as a hooker as well. So Kelleher just about getting the nod for me then at hooker, alongside Jamie George and Ken Owens, with Luke Cowan-Dickie, the next man up if there was to be an injury or suspension. I would possibly be siding just about Ken Owens, though, for a starting test place if there was a gun to my head.
Okay. At tight head?
Tight head, again, the first two were absolutely simple. Tyke Furlong and Kyle Sinclair. I don't think you're going to see many people's squads around the world that don't include the two of those fellas. And then it pretty much came down to Andrew Porter, Thomas Francis, or Xander Fagerson. And again, I just went for Porter. But look, as you know, I've been talking about Andrew Porter for a long time on the tight five. I've always been a big fan of him. Thomas Francis, it has to be said, had an excellent Six Nations for Wales. And he's really improved his game around the park as well, where he's getting on the ball a lot more. He was brilliant for them throughout the campaign. Xander Fagerson was maybe just about a level below, but I would still have him as a +2 if either one of Porter or Francis got injured. I am a big fan of Andrew Porter, and I think we know with Porter as well, he does have the option of versatility. I know we're bringing 3 loose heads as well, but if push came to shove, you could be able to play Andrew Porter as a loose head at some point during the tour.
Do we think Gatland is going to park his Welsh love, whatever the appropriate word is, and
love
in his 50-50 call, not side with the team? He's going to have to go back and coach because he doesn't have to go back and coach them anymore?
Yeah, look, like, to be honest, I think some of the ones I've picked here, I would say when it comes down to the hookers, I would probably say, this is what I'm choosing for the Lions team I'd pick. But I would probably say I'm probably expecting to see Luke Cowan-Dickie, for example, going ahead of Ronan Kelleher. At tight head, I think it absolutely is borderline toss of a coin between Porter and Thomas Francis.
Right.
But yeah, as you kind of said, Warren Gatland is going to know Thomas Francis a lot better than he knows Andrew Porter. Having said all that, then as well, you got someone like Robin McBride, who's in the committee meetings as well, saying he's probably talking up Andrew Porter to go alongside Tyke Furlong as well.
Okay. Second row, Alan Wynne-Jones, nailed on, right? Maro Itoje, nailed on. After that, where are we going?
Two of them absolutely nailed on, and it looks like Alan Wynne-Jones is going to be captain as well. After that, to be honest, I thought Ian Henderson nailed on. I was pretty happy to make that selection, and then it pretty much came down to James Ryan or Johnny Gray. And this was the one I mentioned a few minutes ago where, honest to God, I spent 15-20 minutes just staring at this one last card with Johnny Gray written down alongside James Ryan, and I could not split them.
That'll be really disappointing for James Ryan if he doesn't make this squad, Neil, won't it? The way we would have spoken about him over the last few years, Sexton, Furlong, James Ryan as the 3 players in their position who would get into most teams in the world.
It would, and look, to be honest, up until this time last year, he definitely would have been nailed on, I'd say, in most Lions squads. But look, he's had a difficult season. He had a bad shoulder injury that kept him out for a while and kind of disjointed his return to play when rugby did return. And then he went through, obviously, he was stood down for a short while after a couple of failed HIAs during games in the Six Nations. So he's kind of had that. There's been a bit of scattered time off throughout the season, which is, probably disjointed his campaign ever so slightly as well. I do think Johnny Gray is an absolutely fantastic player. He's big and he's physical, and he is as good a tackler as there is in the world. His tackling stats are just sensational. He's consistently hitting 98, 99%. I think he's missed about 5 tackles in all competitions in the last decade or something like that. He's an absolutely brilliant player. I just about sided with James Ryan, and it's probably for the reason that I sided for Andrew Porter and for Ronan Keller and the likes, is that I have seen more of them than I have of Johnny Gray. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, isn't it your job to be watching lots of leagues around the world? And yeah, I do. I watch plenty of it. But at the same time, you are just naturally going to be seeing more of the Pro 14 than you are maybe of the Premiership or the top 14.
We get it, Neil. It's a Leinster loving.
Yeah, so far anyway. Let's keep horsing through this back row. A strong Irish flavour here. You got Tadhg is on your, and you think will be on the plane as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for one, because of his form over the last 12 months, which has been absolutely brilliant, but also as well, he's able to cover second row and back row as well, which is obviously important. But to be honest, you could pick any, I did 4 second rows, so I'm picking 7 back rows. You could pick any 7 pretty much of the list that's down in front of me, and you're going to get a pretty solid bunch. So this is the area that you're probably going to see a lot of controversy with why wasn't whoever selected? I can't believe this guy wasn't selected. So I've gone with Tadhg Beirne and CJ Stander as the 2 Irish players. I've gone for Tom Curry as the sole Englishman, Hamish Watson from Scotland, and then I've got 3 Welshmen, Josh Navidi, Talupe Faletau and Justin Tipperick. I don't think you can argue against any one of those players getting selected. The argument probably comes with who you haven't selected. So for the likes of Sam Underhill, Billy Vunipola, Van der Fleer, Jamie Ritchie, Matt Fagerson, Sam Simmons, Ross Moriarty, Jack Conan, Alex Dombrandt. There's so many unbelievable back rows out there that they have an embarrassment of riches. And even if I was looking back at, who would come in if whoever got injured, you're probably breaking it down again to the various positions. For example, if Tadhg Beirne got injured, I'd probably actually be more inclined to go back and bring in a second row, because Beirne kind of was covering both of those, and you do have a lot of options elsewhere. If Talupe Faletau got injured, or if CJ Stander got injured, they're kind of carrying the can at number 8 a little bit, so I might be inclined to pick Sam Simmons. Whereas if Josh Navidi or if Hamish Watson went down with a knock, you might pick someone like Sam Underhill or Josh Van der Fleer. So I don't think there's a straight who is the next man up. I think it's very much dependent on who kind of picks up knocks along the way. But yeah, I can't really see how you can argue against any one of these players being selected, particularly Tadhg Beirne, who was unbelievable in the Six Nations. Hamish Watson, Six Nations player of the tournament. And I just think there's a good balance there of guys that can play blindside, like Beirne, Stander, who else as well? Tom Curry can go in there. Number 8, you've got Stander, you've got Faletau, Tom Curry can play in there, and Navidi at a push as well. And then open sides as well, Watson, Tipperick, Curry, and Navidi can all cover across there as well. So you got players that can slot across all the various elements of the back row.
Okay, that's scrum half. Not that controversial, is it?
No, and to be honest, I think once Ben Youngs took his name out of contention, it pretty much opened up a space. It's one of those, it is very open as well, but probably it just isn't going to be controversial because there isn't any kind of absolute, unbelievable candidate in there. In the end, I've gone for Conor Murray, Gareth Davies and Ali Price. I think with Wales, you could have picked either one of Thomas Williams or Gareth Davies. They both had very, very good seasons. In the end, I just about went with Davies. Thomas Williams would be the next man up for me. Danny Kerr then after that probably has come into contention in the last couple of months as well. I'd probably go with him after Thomas Williams if there were injuries. But yeah, it's not a particularly controversial position at the moment. I think Conor Murray is probably the favourite at the moment anyway when it comes to a test shirt.
Out half. This is where the controversy begins. Give me your top 4 here. Only 3 on your plane.
Yeah, my top 4. So the 3 that I picked were Owen Farrell, George Ford and Finn Russell. And next man up, Daniel Biggar of Wales.
England, Scotland and Wales in your top 4. Rounding out your power rankings, is it
why do you hate Ireland so much, Neil?
Is it Joey Carby number 5? Is it
after Dan Biggar, to be honest, I probably have Marcus Smith.
No Sexton at all?
Yeah, look, I think
not even near your selection.
You'd have worries about how many games in a row Sexton can play these days. Like, at the end of the Six Nations, he had the HIA during the Six Nations. He had another one in the game against Munster the week afterwards, and then against Exeter as well. And obviously, he's been stood down ever since. He hasn't played a game. When you got these games in the Lions Tour, the games are coming thick and fast. Like, unfortunately, you can't really be allowing someone to manage their minutes over the course of the couple of months. If you need them to play, you need them to play. And to be honest, I just don't really have too much faith in being able to put Johnny Sexton out week after week, particularly for his own sake as well, when you see the number of injuries that he picks up. And I think when it comes to Ireland, I think the risk is taken because he is desperately needed for Ireland because we don't have the options otherwise. But when you're picking the best players from across Great Britain and Ireland, like you have Eoin Farrell, you have George Ford, Dan Biggar, Finn Russell, there are countless options that can go in there comfortably, and you can rely on them to play week in and week out. And unfortunately, at the moment, you can't do that with Johnny Sexton. And look, that's just the reality of it.
Is he number 6 at least?
Yeah, look, he probably is number 6. We'll give him that.
I mean, when you're on a tour like this, you don't need him to play week in, week out. You need him to be coming off the bench to seal the game with 15 minutes left to go. So you can baby him along, and you've got plenty of time. Is there no part of you thinking that way?
If you're bringing a 41-man squad, I think you can do that. I don't think you can do that if you're bringing a 36-man squad.
Right.
Because if you're giving Johnny Sexton a few weeks off here or there, you're relying on 2 other players to be playing every single game.
Yeah, I suppose maybe you can.
I just don't think this is a tour you can carry players on. To be honest,
maybe Stuart Hogg can play at 10 for a game, or maybe one of those midweek games you play one of your scrum halves at 10, and you're like, look, in history, anything that is remembered from this tour will happen on the 3 Saturday evenings at 5 o'clock when the tests are happening. And if I need Johnny Sexton to come on and kick a penalty with 5 minutes left to go in the final of those 3, it's probably worth it.
Well, like, here's the thing, Neil. So if you had the choice between Finn Russell and Johnny Sexton in a one-off test against the Springboks, who are you picking?
I'm picking Johnny Sexton.
But there you go. Like, is that not what Gatland's going to be thinking about? That he'll get his one test out of him. That he won't be his number 1 out half anyway. Eoin Farrell might well be ahead of him on the pecking order if everybody's fully fit and is guaranteed to be fit. That you're only carrying him for that one test that you want to get 60 minutes out of him for.
I'm not sure. I think he's going to be factoring in as well the fact that he has other players who are perfectly viable test starters to go along with it as well. And look, I think when it comes to Finn Russell as well, obviously having Gregor Townsend there to bat for him as well is going to be huge. But yeah, I just think it's a risk he doesn't need to take.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Warren G agrees with you. The centres.
Centres. I've put my Irish hat back on and my Irish jersey.
Too late. Too late.
Oh, the tension. But yeah, no, I've picked 4 centres. I've gone Robbie Henshaw, Gary Ringrose, Jonathan Davies and Henry Slade. Manu Tuilagi then is the next man up if he's able to show he's fit enough over the next kind of few weeks. Unfortunately, you see, he's been out injured since August with a really bad Achilles injury. There had been hope that he'd be able to get a game or 2 in before the Lions squad would have been announced. That didn't come to pass. So unfortunately, if he is going to be proving his fitness, he's probably going to have to be doing it after a squad is announced. After the squad is announced tomorrow and over the next few weeks as well. I would be more than happy if he was able to put in a couple of good games between now and the end of the season, have him definitely as the next man in to step up. If not, I might actually go with Chris Harris, who's a Scotland and Gloucester centre. I thought he's been absolutely brilliant this season and has just looked really versatile, comfortable on the ball, good in defence. But I think this was aside from whether or not it was Ringrose or Tuilagi, this was a reasonably easy enough selection to make. I think Robbie Henshaw has been absolutely nailed on for months now. He's been absolutely outstanding. Jonathan Davies was probably always going to be there as well if he was fit. And Henry Slade, I just love Henry Slade. I think he's a brilliant kicking option as well that teams have. And to be honest as well, if push came to shove and you needed to throw someone out for a midweek game at out half, he'd probably be able to do a shift at number 10 as well, as well as Stuart Hogg.
Okay, so that's the centres. The back 3, we've got 4 minutes left here, so let's get through these because we might actually get finished.
This was actually another really, really difficult one. So I was picking 6 back 3 players, and like the tricky thing is trying to find a combination of guys who can play both wing and full back, because you don't want to be picking 6 natural wingers and having, only, or 5 natural wingers and only having Stuart Hogg, who's going to be nailed on. But look, I went for Stuart Hogg. I went for a few Welsh guys, Lewis Rees-Zammit, Liam Williams and Josh Adams. And then I went for 2 English players, Johnny May and Anthony Watson, with Keith Earls, the next man up, if there was to be an injury. Duhan van der Merwe possibly after that. And I'd probably go Simon Zebo then after that. It's an area where you can see a lot of call-ups, in faurnes.
Yeah.
Hugo Keenan not affecting things there?
Yeah, like the thing with Keenan, he's absolutely solid. He like the great thing about him is he does not make mistakes. I'm still waiting to see a little bit more from him in attack, and that might sound a little bit greedy because he's been so good since he came in. But like, I don't think you can argue against the experience. Like, Stuart Hogg was always going to be there, and if you're talking about fullbacks as well, Stuart Hogg absolutely nailed on. Liam Williams has bundles of experience. He's absolutely brilliant, and also as well, in the last few months, he showed it with Wales once he got back into the team after his suspension. His form was bang on as well. Plus, he's an equally viable candidate on the wing as fullback as well. Josh Adams and Lewis Rees-Zammit, I think they select themselves because of their form. They're just natural try scorers. Johnny May and Anthony Watson, it's hard to overlook them as well. There's just so many really, really good options there in the back 3.
We're going to note this time tomorrow whether or not Warren Gatland agrees with your selections or which bits he disagrees with. Neil, good stuff. RIP your mentions, by the way. The Leinster militia are already, I'd say, busying themselves with their attacks.
I'm going on private.
Good stuff, Neil. Thanks for that. Neil Treacy with this week's version of the Type 5, which was obviously a Type 36. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio across the day. You can get this live on the OTB Sports app at 1 o'clock. OTB Gold is Chris Waddle. Our Mount Rushmore today is Antrim. That's at 3. At 4 o'clock, it's our retro panel with John Hartson, Maddie Holland and Kenny Cunningham. OTB Gold is Paul McGrath talking about the Jack Charlton era from 6 tonight. We're live on air and online with Wednesday Night Rugby tonight, Champions League updates and much more tomorrow. We're going to be joined by Stuart Lancaster, Graham Hunter, Michael Verney, and we'll have TV with Sue and much more on the way live from 7:30. First, here's Brian O'Driscoll talking about Leinster's Champions Cup exit.
On, we had the Heineken Champions Cup semi-finals at the weekend. We have Lions squad announced on Thursday. Brian O'Driscoll, evening.
Good evening, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Let's start with the weekend then. La Rochelle against Toulouse at Twickenham. Toulouse beat Bordeaux on the Saturday, and then O'Gara. I mean, I'm surprised he wasn't jumping the hoardings again. Incredible. 32 points to 23 against Leinster. So, overall take on this game. La Rochelle won this more than Leinster lost it, or a bit of both?
No, I think the former. La Rochelle, very, very good in the second half. Leinster didn't help themselves. They just... I don't think it was as bad as Saracens, but it did feel a bit like their Achilles heel coming back again, where, that really physically dominant pack, beating up our pack and stopping any source of possession, and then, doing so much damage with ball in hand came back again at us. And if you look at some of the ball carriers that La Rochelle had, Skelton was unbelievable. Antonio played for 65 minutes. He's 23 stone. And looked as fit as anyone else out there. Aldred was brilliant. Burgery, their hooker, was outstanding in carrying and making nuisance of himself at the ruck. So lots of different factors kind of worked against Leinster, on top of them shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. Like they left a couple of gilt-edged chances out there. And these games are all games of momentum, and you just, you have to, ride the purple patch of the opposition, and you got to take your chance when they present themselves. And when they're few and far between, you have to make them count. And Leinster didn't manage to do that and never got any momentum in the second half.
Because Leinster started well. La Rochelle gave away 5 penalties in the first 10 minutes. Leinster were up by a point at the interval. What was your sense of the game then? Yeah,
obviously they looked very physically, dominant. They made a shambles of multiple kickoff receipts. Dylan Lades couldn't get the trajectory of the ball in the sun, which I'm sure he's well used to playing in, but for some reason he just couldn't get it, and it gave Leinster access deep into La Rochelle territory, and they were patient. You know, the first 5 or 6 minutes, the referee lost his patience with Liebenberg, sent him to the bin, and it was, you know, it was no more than Leinster deserved at 7-0. But they just kind of, you know, La Rochelle never went away, and they never put that early possession and territory, you know, into points on the scoreboard. They should have been a couple of scores up. They shouldn't have, you know, let La Rochelle can eke their way back into the game. They got a line-out drive, and then they kicked a penalty, and all of a sudden it's 7-3 when they've barely had a touch of the ball. So there were small little things like that kind of hung over, and you thought, gosh, they really need to make this count, because you know what the potential of that La Rochelle team is, which we subsequently got for the next 60 minutes.
And what changed in your view? Because for anyone who's just looking at the scoreboard, 32-23, I mean, it's a very good win, but it was actually really double scores into the last kind of 10 minutes. Ross Burns scored that late try, which almost felt kind of consolation territory. So what did La Rochelle do in the second half that Leinster just couldn't cope with?
Yeah, I think the scoreline probably ultimately in the end did flatter Leinster a small bit because of that late score. At the ruck, I've never seen Leinster so exposed at ruck time. Their hooker Burgery must have had 2 or 3 turnovers. Dylan Lades got one. Antonio got one. They were all picking up turnovers, and when you can't get any, you know, fluidity to your game plan if you're turning over ball after 3 or 4 phases. And one of La Rochelle's biggest attacking weapons is their line-out, because of their line-out maul and because of the power and size of them, even though they weren't brilliant throughout the whole game. But even when Leinster, you know, disrupted the line-out and got the ball back, their exits from that, they just kicked the ball directly back to them, or kicked it into touch and gave them another opportunity at it. So it felt as though there was probably a bit of lack of control at halfback. I was trying to wonder whether things would have been dramatically different if Jonathan Sexton was at 10. I think there would have been, you know, his experience, he would have known how to kind of manipulate the La Rochelle defence, which was incredibly good for the whole game. But it just felt as though they were flying off the line, and they needed to be checked a little bit. They needed a little dink in behind, like La Rochelle did to Leinster. They needed to kick, you know, go for another 1 or 2 kick passes just to make sure that their wingers were holding reasonable width. None of those things were challenged. Okay. Whereas, you know, conversely, La Rochelle had massive range to their game. They obviously had the huge power play up front, but Ohio West had an armchair ride. He was, you know, picking his passes. He was, you know, kicking to Vito out on the touchline, and then, you know, he was kicking his goals on top of that. So it just felt like a real no errors sort of game plan. Other than those initial 10 minutes from La Rochelle, they didn't do an awful lot wrong. Defended stoically. Their willingness to get up off the ground and present extra bodies in the front line, not have any, you know, dead bodies lying on the ground, was a real point of difference. And conversely, Leinster were having to recycle, you know, ball with 3-4 players in each ruck, and straight away it was a numbers game advantage La Rochelle on the defensive line, and that's where the line speed came from. So there were so many different aspects that you could kind of retrospectively pull apart, but it was a very frustrating day for Leinster, because they got beaten up, but they had chances to put themselves into a place where momentum would have counted. They gave up try-scoring opportunities just before half-time. Larmer made a break down the touchline and threw a poor pass to Luke McGrath. And then right after half-time, Ryan Baird, it was kind of a bit of a nothing play. A ball got batted down, and he came galloping through and got an arm through a stray ball. If that sticks, you know, to try in the corner, and it's 2 scores ahead. So these things are key in semi-finals. And La Rochelle rode their luck in that regard, and then just built momentum and squeezed the life out of Leinster.
So if we were to try and look for some common traits in Leinster's failings in the last couple of Heineken Champions Cup matches, knockout matches, this one and then the 2 against Saracens, and admittedly the middle Saracens one, they just killed Leinster at the scrum and were open at a lead, and it gets very, very difficult then. But the thing people would say from afar is these big physical teams, Leinster have a bit of a problem with. How much of it is down to size and power here, in your opinion?
There's definitely an element to it, no doubt whatsoever. But I think good teams are able to
get beyond that too. And I just don't feel as though they played to any space. Now, they weren't, in many ways, they weren't allowed through ball in hand. But if you're not allowed to do that, if there's a rush defence coming from the outside, you've got to be able to find that space with the boot. And a kick pass, a flat 20-metre kick pass can be way more effective than three passes out of back line when there's a huge press. But it just didn't feel as though that was ever on the cards. There was one time that Ross Byrne went on penalty advantage to James Lowe, and it was a great kick and just dropped a little bit too far. There's another chance, that drops 1 yard shorter. Lowe catches it full tilt, takes on Bryce Doolan, probably going to beat him one-on-one. There's a score. So as much as you're reading lots of reports, and it's kind of doom and gloom for Leinster because it feels the same as Saracens again, they still had lots of access into the game, into creating opportunities for themselves. And other than the first try, they took the first one and the Ross Byrne one at the end, they took no others. And when La Rochelle were keeping the scoreboard ticking over the way they were with Ohio West goal kicks and his drop goal, and then built on that with the scores, it was a real Munster feel to that. It's what Rog has done for years. 3-6-9 try, and all of a sudden you're 2 scores ahead or 3 scores ahead, and you're kind of thinking, how did that happen? So my feeling is that there's definitely an issue when really physical teams do come up against Leinster, that's for sure. But they have the capabilities of seeing their way through that, but they didn't manage to do that on this occasion. I don't think, if you look at it as well, right? Yeah. So semi-final wise, people are saying it feels like Leinster are a mile away from a Heineken final. They're not. You flip that fixture and have it in the RDS. Leinster are comfortable favourites, and they might be able to see it through, and there's home advantage plays a big factor in that. So you're never that far away. If they go out and play La Rochelle again tomorrow, they won't lose to them by 11 points. I really don't think they will. So they just caught them on a day where they weren't firing, that they didn't have big individual performers, even though guys played with lots of spirit, but it just wasn't enough. And I think when you're not controlling things at halfback, it has a big impact on the rest of the team.
Yeah. It's perfect cup rugby. If you're La Rochelle and Ronan O'Gara, we'll talk about that in a second. It's a perfect cup rugby afternoon execution, and you make off into the sunset, and it's a beautiful feeling, I would suspect. I guess the other point you would make about Leinster in this scenario is because their pack is so dominant at Pro 14 level and much of European level as well, they are not overly practiced at playing without parity up front. Ross Byrne does not find himself in that situation very often. Johnny Sexton tended to find himself in that situation more so with Ireland than with Leinster. So do they look like a team who, once, twice a year find themselves in that scenario, and then, I was going to say, almost forget to mix it up and have that bit of variety that you're talking about, but you would surely think during the week they're aware things could go that way and they will need to mix it up. So it's kind of hard to make too many excuses for them, but there is something maybe in the point that they don't face this scenario very often across the season.
It does feel, Joe, that it's becoming more apparent. It really does. That unless you find yourself in those circumstances a couple of times a year, and it's very hard to prep yourself for it when the chips are down and when you do come up against it and you've got people a little bit off their game. So, like I said, there's kind of multiple factors at work there. But there is an issue with the Pro 14, and we've said it for a while. We've been trying to promote it as being it's not so bad. It's a poor tournament, and the quality is very poor. And I think you look at what the English teams and what the French teams are having to deliver week on week, and even when the standard mightn't be brilliant, even though the Premiership's been very good, the standard's been very good, it's a dogfight. Leinster have won the Pro 14 the last few years at a canter in third gear using 59 players. That just shouldn't happen when you're able to delve that deep into your academy and sub-academy and still, produce try bonuses in almost every game. What are you learning from that? You only learn against better teams, and at the moment, other teams are learning from them and will be getting better as a result. But I don't think Leinster are learning a huge amount because of the opposition that they are coming up against week in, week out. And
And until they do get the Stormers and the Sharks and the other South African teams, and they start getting that crazy physicality and the different type of game thrown at them, I think they will get to a plateau level of still feeling that shock when they do get the Skeltons of the world coming at them, or the Atogis or the Vunipolas, which ordinarily they don't get.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Because there's no way they can somehow use the Pro 14 to prepare for that, you know, like let's give them parity up front or something this evening and try and play on the back foot. You just can't engineer those scenarios in a match. You have to face them for real.
Yeah, you know you can't. But you know they'll say as well. Listen, we had physically imposed ourselves on them in the first 15 minutes, so that Achilles heel is nonsense. But you know, when you look back, La Rochelle were even, you know, Leinster came out all guns blazing the first 10-15 minutes, and they won the battle. It's very hard to do that for 80 minutes. And even if you watch some of the La Rochelle defence in those early exchanges, it was still very good, and Leinster really had to work hard for it. But then they really grew into the game when they got their hands on the ball a little bit, and they forced indiscipline from Leinster, and they, you know, got the scoreboard ticking. You could just sense that they were very patient with their performance, and that they could go to multiple aspects. Their scrum was very good, line out was decent for the most part, really good quality of passing, and their ruck, their annoyance at the ruck, at Leinster's ruck, but the clarity on their own ball. Kerr Barlow, you know, challenged the pillar defence and, you know, probed in behind. They didn't throw silly 50-50 offloads. It just felt as though they made way more good decisions than bad, and their execution was very good, countered with, you know, Leinster's execution being very poor at pivotal times.
For O'Gara and for Gibbs, I mean, O'Gara in particular, the hype train goes into overdrive now. This is really impressive stuff all of a sudden, you know, Heineken Champions Cup final, second in the top 14. That's kind of dreamland stuff.
It really is, yeah. And, you know, he'll have taken a huge amount of satisfaction from obviously beating Leinster, you know, because of the history and tradition that he's had with Leinster, but also the knowledge that they've been one of the best teams in Europe for the last 3 or 4 years, and consistently in there, and they know that they've delved into a really great performance to be able to better them. And you know, they go into a final with, you know, nothing to lose. Toulouse are going for their 5th title. They've got all the history there. But you know, you look at that La Rochelle defence, and then the other components that they build their attacking game on. I tell you what, it'll take a really good Toulouse performance to better them in Twickenham in a few weeks' time, because Toulouse are very good, don't get me wrong, and they can mix it up as well. But the miserly aspect of the La Rochelle defence was really the point of difference that I kind of came away from the game and thought, wow, I wasn't anticipating really good tackle technique, really good decisions, great line speed, but also being able to cover the backfield. They kind of got everything right. And, you know, at one point Leinster had to play deep in their own territory because La Rochelle had, you know, lots of numbers in the backfield, but yet their 12 players in the front line felt like they were doing the job of 14 or 15. So it was a performance definitely built on defence, and then they took their few opportunities very, very well, and coasted to a comfortable victory ultimately.
What a miserable May for Leinster now, you know. The Rainbow Cup doesn't exactly grab you, I would think. Well, if you were in the shoes of some of the kind of higher profile guys hoping to head on Lions tour, and Rainbow Cup is on, and Leo Cullen saying, what do you fancy? I mean, would you be kind of thinking, what's the point here? Let's wrap up in cotton wool, or would you use the games? How do you suspect Leinster will use the Rainbow Cup now?
No, you gotta get games. You know, for the guys that are going to go on Lions tours, I think it's vitally important that they stay fresh and stay match fit going into a Lions tour. For those that are going to be left out, those Irish internationals that will miss out, I think it's an opportunity to give some badly needed rest time to a few guys. It's been a long season. People have forgotten that, you know, it picked up in August and has, you know, finished last year, and then there was a tiny break and then straight through this one. So there's lots of tired bodies out there, and I think it is a good chance for them to put their feet up, get an extended break, switch off from rugby, and then come back for a fresh pre-season, because ultimately in their heads the season is over. Once this Lions selection is picked on Thursday, the season is going to be exciting for a handful of guys, well, 3 or 4 guys at most in that Leinster setup, and for all those other internationals, to try and get themselves up for Rainbow Cup. And maybe if they haven't had a huge amount of game time this year, there's something in that, build a reputation for the future. But for some of the older heads, it's going to be a tough slog, and I think the coaching ticket need to see that and react accordingly.
So you were obviously captain for the New Zealand tour, and therefore would have known you were going on the tour at this stage. Did you know with all the others? Had you heard, or did you just assume? I can't remember, were you surprised in 01 or not?
No, I didn't know in 01. I was hopeful, but to be honest with you, I can't even remember how I found out.
We keep hearing of a lot of Leinster players like you. I guess you're breaking off training and you're at the gym and Sky Sports News comes on. That's kind of how it works.
Well, yeah, no. So 2013, I clearly remember, and I had no idea whether I was going. Again, hopeful, but not sure. And so I watched it at home. It just happened that we had a break in schedule, but lots of teams will be training in their base, and they will take time away from it to build their schedule to make sure that they're all watching together. And from the heartbreaking part is you're going to there's going to be elation and devastation in certain clubs around the Britain and Ireland, because you're going to have 30 or 40 bodies being able to see your emotions through that, which is not an easy thing to do. I was glad to watch the 2013 Lions at home with my wife, and I stupidly had mine on Sky Plus delay, like by a minute, and so I was watching it, and I got a text from my sister when Stuart Hogg's name came up, and it just said "get in," and I was like, geez, I didn't know she was such a big Stuart Hogg fan. And then I realised that it had been delayed.
You're going to be on Thursday's show giving a full-bodied reaction to the whole thing, so there's no point going through, squad name by name. And
I hadn't really thought about it, Joe, to be honest with you. I haven't had to do a squad, which is unusual at this point.
You're the lucky one. I don't know how many squads I've read.
It's pretty thankless, it really is, because everyone's squad is different than yours. But there's not a million Irish guys. It's probably about 6 or 7 that would think I should really be in this, but there'll be a lot of very nervous guys on Wednesday night.
Yes, there's a lot of not so sure types. So is Johnny Sexton a locked and loaded in type for you, or is he nervous?
Sorry, if I'm selecting it, he is. If I'm looking at Warren Gatland's squad, I don't think he's locked and loaded. Just because because of the age profile, because of the issues more recently, but just for me that creates an uncertainty, and also the fact that Dan Biggar's definitely going, and Owen Farrell's definitely going, and is he going to pick one more? And it's very hard to leave Finn Russell out in that regard. He's going to get an awful lot of flack, even though Finn Russell's not a Warren Gatland type of player. So he's got lots of credit in the bank from performances, and particularly what he did against England. So I think he is in, but I think he'll still have a nervous night because he won't take it for granted.
And you don't see this Lions tour 4 years on from Farrell and Sexton doubling up nicely in New Zealand. Is South Africa, given Sexton's age maybe, and also the challenge South Africa will pose, is the Farrell-Sexton axis not something to expect this time around for you?
No, I don't think you rule it out, but I think, lots of, you look at Gats with his coaching ticket, or, a lot of the personnel that are going in the backroom staff, he goes with the same tried and trusted. They've done a great job previously, and it's hard not to call on people that have delivered for you previously. And I think we'll see that right across the board in any 50-50 cases. They'll go with the guys that were there 4 years ago, or potentially even involved 8 years ago. So I think there is a chance that we'll still see Johnny Sexton and Owen Farrell, but there's a chance that Johnny Sexton might be at home. That's the reality of it. And it depends on where you're talking. You know, here we think, oh yes, Johnny should go. In the UK, like he's not in lots of people's squads.
No.
We have an inflated view versus what's gone on over there of this current Johnny Sexton. I think we were all huge admirers 3-4 years ago. It just feels as though because of the age profile, because of playing less game time, it does affect your opinion on how someone can perform in a very physical environment.
Yeah. So who are you, if not quite putting your house on, who are the 6-7 that you feel pretty confident Gatland will pick? I'm not asking for your squad. I'm kind of asking you to double guess Gatland almost.
Well, I think Conor Murray will definitely go. I think Furlong will definitely go, and Robbie Henshaw will definitely go. So they're the three firmest for me. I think Tig Byrne comes in just after that. I think his utility, the nature of his utility play, really will work in his favour, even though, Gats does love big players as well. So that's where, for me, I was wondering about James Ryan. He got through a good bit of work, but again, when one of the second rows is the standout players against you in a key game, I don't know. I think he will go, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was left out. And I think the only thing that in James Ryan's favour is that is it him or Ian Henderson? And also Courtney Laws hasn't played yet. And Courtney Laws delivered for Gats 4 years ago, and he's big and physical and tries to throw his body around. So, and he's got that size. Gats always was fixated on understanding the size of his second rows. Alan Jones, 120 kilos. Jake Ball, 118, 119 kilos. Paul O'Connell, 109, 110 kilos. That was always a thing with Gats. So expect him to go for bigger players because you look at the size of that Springbok pack. So James Ryan just in, yeah. And to be honest with you, beyond that, I don't know who he's going to pick in the centres. With George North now gone as well, I don't know whether Gary Ringrose makes the team. I wonder, will he take a punt on Manu Tuilagi to offer something different? He's going to play next week or the week after, which is a real risk. But he, if you can get him anyway fit and healthy, he just offers something that nobody else in Britain and Ireland does. So I wonder, will he take that risk? But other than that, Henry Slade will probably go, and Farrell will go. But from an Irish perspective,
back three. Do you see anyone in the back three for Ireland?
I don't think so. Like, if you look at the back threes, you're going to have Johnny May, you're going to have Anthony Watson, you're potentially going to have Jack Nowell as well, who also Gats loves. You could have the three English wingers. You're going to have Rhys Sammet and Josh Adams. So there's 5 wingers. You're not going to take 5 wingers. Plus the full backs are going to be Hogg and Liam Williams for sure. So I don't know which of our Irish players fits in there. Jacob Stockdale, because of his versatility, play wing and full back, maybe at a push. But I think if you're Van der Merwe is another one that potentially could get in on the wing because of his size and brute force. So I don't anticipate a back three player getting in from Ireland, no.
It's not quite 2009 here, is it?
It's really not. Yeah. And I'm trying to see where else, will there be, you look at the ball carrying ability of a Ronan Kelleher. Is he someone that could be the bolter that, if he could get his line out sorted because of what he's capable of giving you from a carrying perspective? But I just don't know. He hasn't done enough and hasn't been consistent enough, and obviously was lost at the weekend too. So yeah, I don't see too many others jumping out, being brutally honest. I think you're going to have a big Welsh selection, a big English selection, and we'll probably get 6 or 7. I just haven't picked them all. Yeah, so sure. If we do say, Furlong, Henshaw, Murray, Tig Byrne, I'm going to say Johnny, and James Ryan, and one other. I'm going to say 7.
Okay. Porter might squeeze in his versatility. Not sure.
Yeah, but he doesn't really play loose head anymore. You know, that versatility piece is, you have to be doing it week on week. Like, it's a few years since he's played loose head, so I don't think it's a case of, sure, I have that in the bank, I'll just flip across to loose head. There's an art to that as well. So he is very much a tight head now. So yeah. I don't know, and as well, who else on the tight head from? Yeah, there's not a plethora of tight heads. In fairness, I don't know. Fagerson, will he go instead of someone like Porter? You know, probably.
Right, well, you're on Thursday anyway. Sorry, that for anyone watching YouTube, that was a very parochial how are the Irish going to do chat for obvious reasons. So you'll be on Thursday to give a fuller view of the squad. We'll also talk Ulster tomorrow. We didn't get a chance to do it this evening. Clock is against us. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone. # Team of Us, everyone in. Brian, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well done, Joe. Thanks. Bye.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new